What if I told you that the moment your eyes finally close tonight, you are not ending a day at all? You are keeping an appointment. Not one written on any calendar you can see, not one your phone will ever remind you of, but one made quietly, long ago, in a place before words, by the part of you that has always known there is more waiting for you than you have yet let yourself receive. That part of you never forgot. It has simply been patient, the way deep water is patient, with a stone dropped into it, waiting without hurry for the ripples to finally reach the shore, waiting the way a mother waits by a window for a child she knows, without question, without doubt, is already on the way home. Florence Scovel Shinn spent her life teaching a simple, almost scandalous idea, that the word spoken in faith becomes a wand, that supply is not something you chase down some long, dusty road, but something you already stand inside of, the way a fish stands inside the sea, without ever having to ask the water for permission to be wet, without ever once doubting that the sea will hold it, without ever once swimming toward the horizon in a panic, worried the water might simply run out beneath it. Tonight is not about trying harder. You have tried hard enough for one lifetime already, harder than anyone ever thanked you for, harder than anyone even noticed. Tonight is about remembering something you were never actually taught to forget, something that was simply covered over, the way snow covers a field without ever once killing what is growing underneath it, the way a long winter never once means the roots below have stopped their quiet, patient work. Before we go any further, if it feels right, let a like settle quietly under this video. Not because you owe it, not because anything is required of you tonight, but because it tells me, in some small and simple way, that this found the right person tonight, the one who was finally ready to receive it, the one whose whole body has been waiting, without quite knowing it, for permission to finally rest. And I would love to know, before your eyes grow too heavy to type, where in the world you are lying down to hear this tonight. Type it if you can, even just the name of the city, even just the country, even just a single word into the dark. There is something moving through so many rooms at once tonight, through so many quiet houses, so many darkened bedrooms, so many tired hearts finally allowed to rest, and it helps, somehow, in a way I cannot fully explain, to know how far this reaches, how many hands are opening at the very same moment, under very different skies, under different stars that are all, somehow, still the same sky. Stay with me until the very end, because the final words of this journey carry a single sentence, one line, quietly built to be the last thing your mind holds before sleep takes you all the way under, and what the mind holds last, it tends to carry all night long, turning it over and over the way water turns a stone smooth, so that by morning, without any effort at all, without a single act of will, it has simply become true, the way a shoreline slowly becomes shaped by a tide that never once had to be told what to do. So let your shoulders drop now, right where you are. Let your jaw soften, let your hands loosen in whatever position they have found tonight. Let your breath slow just slightly, just enough, just barely enough for something old and tired to finally let go. There is nowhere else you are needed tonight. There is nothing left to solve before you are allowed to rest. The old idea, the one so many of us carried without ever choosing it, handed down quietly the way an old coat is handed down, without anyone asking if it fits, says you must earn your good through worry, through gripping, through staying awake to manage everything, through holding the whole world together with your own two tired hands, your own aching shoulders. Tonight teaches something gentler. Tonight teaches that wealth, like sleep itself, arrives not when you force it, but when you finally, quietly, stop blocking the door, when you finally let the hand resting against the wood fall soft and open at your side. You have spent so much of your life asking permission for the good things you want, asking the calendar if now is finally the right time, asking the bank if you are finally allowed, asking the opinions of people who were never given the authority to decide what belongs to you, people who were simply frightened themselves, and who handed their fear to you the way a cold hand passes its chill to whatever it touches, the way a room grows cold simply because someone left a window open somewhere far away, long before you ever walked into it. And beneath all that asking, beneath all those years of quietly checking with everyone but yourself, standing at the edge of your own life like a guest waiting for someone else to invite you in, something in you has been waiting so patiently to finally be told that you never needed permission in the first place, that the invitation was written in your name before you ever learned to read. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that what is yours by divine right cannot ultimately be kept from you by any person, any circumstance, any old fear dressed up convincingly as fact. Fear is an excellent actor. It can wear the costume of practicality, of realism, of simply being sensible, of simply being responsible, and for years you may have believed the costume was the truth underneath it, may have applauded its performance without ever once realizing it was only ever a performance. But tonight, you are not asking. Tonight, you are simply remembering the claim that was already made on your behalf, before you had the words for it, before you even had a name, before anyone told you what you were and were not allowed to want, before the world had a chance to hand you its opinions about your own worth. Feel how different this is from striving. Striving reaches out with tight fingers, grasping at a future that keeps slipping backward the harder it is chased, the way sand runs faster through a fist that squeezes it, the way water slips faster through hands that panic and clutch instead of simply cupping, open and unhurried. But claiming is quiet. Claiming rests. It is the difference between running after a train, breathless, arms waving, heart pounding in your ears, and realizing, calmly, unhurried, that the train was already assigned your seat, that it has been holding that seat the entire time, reserved, untouched, waiting, that it was never going to leave without you, no matter how still you stood on the platform. You do not need to run. You only need to walk toward what was always going to be yours, slow, unhurried, because urgency was never actually part of the plan. Only fear was. And fear, tonight, can finally rest too, can finally set down whatever it has been carrying for so long on your behalf. I quietly claim what is already mine by divine right. I quietly claim what is already mine by divine right. Let that settle into the base of your spine, like warmth settling slowly into cold water, spreading outward in soft rings you can almost feel against your skin, rings that keep moving long after the stone that caused them has already sunk out of sight. You do not have to defend this claim. You do not have to prove it to anyone, least of all yourself, least of all the tired, doubting voice that has questioned you for years, the voice that learned somewhere, long ago, to speak first and loudest simply because no one ever told it to be quiet. It simply is. It was true before the doubting voice ever learned to speak, true before it even existed, true the way morning is true, even in the middle of the darkest hour of the night. And the moment a thing simply is, held quietly in the deepest chamber of your knowing, undisturbed and unguarded, the outer world eventually has no choice at all but to rearrange itself gently around that truth, the way furniture in a dark room eventually reveals its true shape once the light is finally allowed back in, once someone finally, gently, reaches for the switch. Now, I want to explore what happens in the unseen world the instant a claim like this is made quietly and without struggle, because something shifts there first, long before anything shifts here, long before your eyes could ever catch it happening, long before the world outside has any evidence at all to show you. Behind the scenes of every good thing that has ever come to you, whether you noticed it at the time or not, Whether you were even looking in the right direction to see it arrive, there has been a thread, not a coincidence, not luck arriving by some careless accident, but a single unbroken line of supply, reaching from the source of all things, directly into your life, your hands, your open account, your unexpected envelope, arriving in the mail, on a day you needed it, more than you admitted even to yourself, more than you would have ever said out loud to another living soul. Florence Scovel Shinn described this constant supply as something that flows the moment fear stops damming the river, the moment the tight, anxious grip finally loosens enough to let the current move again, the way a hand finally unclenches from around a hose and water, which was there all along, simply continues on its way. The thread was never missing. It was only obscured, the way stars are never actually gone during the day, only outshone by a brighter, louder light called worry, a light so insistent it convinces you the stars themselves must have vanished entirely, must have burned out somewhere while you weren't watching, when really they were simply waiting behind the glare for evening to return, patient the way only very old and very certain things can be patient. Tonight, imagine that thread made visible, faint and golden, running from somewhere far beyond your understanding, farther than thought can travel, farther than the edges of any sky you have ever looked up into, straight into the center of your chest, resting there, quietly, warm, unbroken, glowing so softly you might almost miss it if you were looking too hard. It has always been there. It was there during the leanest years, the years that felt the most frightening, the years you don't like to think about too closely even now, quietly holding, quietly working beneath the surface, even when you couldn't feel it, even when the evidence in front of you seemed to argue loudly otherwise. This is not naive optimism dressed up to make you feel better in a difficult moment. This is a truth simply too fine, too quiet, too gentle in its movements, to be seen by anxious eyes straining too hard, too fast, to find it. The impact of remembering this thread is not loud. It does not announce itself with fireworks or trumpets or any grand display at all. It arrives instead as a strange, settled calm in situations that used to make your stomach drop the moment they appeared in your mailbox or your inbox or your thoughts at 3 a.m. A bill arrives, and instead of the old familiar panic rising up through the chest, there is a small, curious steadiness, almost a quiet amusement, as if some deeper part of you already knows exactly how this resolves, has always known, has seen the ending long before the middle ever arrived, and is simply waiting, patiently, for the rest of you to catch up to what it has known all along. The golden thread of supply has never once let go of me. The golden thread of supply has never once let go of me. Let your breathing slow around that sentence. Let it move through you the way warmth moves through tea held in cold hands, slowly, gently, from the fingertips inward. There is no rush to understand how it works. The lungs do not understand how they breathe either, and yet they have never once, not for a single second in your entire life, not even while you slept, not even while you forgot to notice, forgotten how. Now, I want to explore what happens deep inside you, in a place Florence Scovel Shinn called a storehouse that never runs dry, because that storehouse and this thread were never actually two separate things at all, only two names for the very same quiet miracle. There is a room inside you that has never once been empty, no matter what your bank balance said on any given morning, no matter what year it was, no matter how tight or frightening things looked from the outside looking in, no matter how many nights you lay awake doing math that only ever seemed to make the fear grow larger. Florence Scovel Shinn wrote plainly, without embellishment, without hedging her words in any way at all, God is my unfailing supply, not sometimes, not when conditions are favorable, Not when the timing feels convenient, not when the economy agrees, not when the world outside gives its quiet permission. Unfailing, meaning it does not fail, meaning it cannot fail, because its nature is not tied to circumstance, the way a candle is tied to wind, flickering and threatened by every passing draught, but to something far older, far steadier, something circumstance has never once had the power to touch, not in all the long history of circumstance trying. You were taught, somewhere along the way, perhaps so early you don't even remember learning it, perhaps before you even had language for what you were absorbing, to check the outer shelves first, the job, the market, the mood of other people, before you believed you could eat tonight, before you allowed yourself to feel safe enough to exhale. But there was always an inner storehouse running quietly behind all of that, stocked not by your effort, not by your worry, not by how many hours you stayed awake managing things that were never actually yours to manage alone, but by a source that has never once needed your permission to keep giving, has never once paused to ask whether you had earned the next delivery. This is not a metaphor meant to comfort you emptily, the way a kind lie comforts a frightened child before bed. This is the actual structure beneath everything that has ever fed you, housed you, kept you warm, carried you through a month that shouldn't have worked out on paper, and somehow, quietly, without fanfare, without a single dramatic gesture, did. What's particularly powerful about turning your attention here, toward this inner room, instead of toward the outer shelves that seem to change with every season, every headline, every worried conversation, is that the outer shelves start to fill faster once you stop staring at them with fear. Fear is a strange shopper. It walks into a full room and still sees empty shelves, still counts what is missing before it notices what is there, still walks straight past abundance in search of the one gap it was already looking for. Peace walks into that very same room and finds abundance it hadn't even noticed before. Tucked into corners, fear was too anxious, too rushed, too busy scanning for danger to ever look toward. God is my unfailing supply, now and always. God is my unfailing supply, now and always. Let this rest in your chest, like a lamp, left quietly on, in a house you thought was dark. It was never dark, not for one moment, not even in the years you were most certain it was. You had simply forgotten where the switch was, forgotten you had ever been the one holding it, forgotten your own hand had been resting on it the whole time. Now, I want to explore what happens when prayer itself turns around, faces the other direction entirely, and stops asking for what it can instead thank for, because that single turn, small as it seems, changes everything, absolutely everything, that follows it. Most of us were taught to pray as though we were standing outside a locked house in the cold, knocking politely, begging whoever lived inside to eventually let us have a little of what was already stacked in the pantry just behind that door, hoping we had knocked the right number of times, in the right way, with the right amount of deserving in our voice. Florence Scovel Shinn taught something quieter and far more radical and far more restful than any of us were ever told to expect from prayer. She taught that true prayer is not asking a distant power to eventually decide in your favor, weighing your worthiness on some invisible scale you can never quite see the numbers of. True prayer is recognizing, right now, in this present breath, in this exact moment, that the good is already accomplished, already given, already yours in the unseen, simply waiting patiently, without impatience, for your acceptance to let it finally appear in the seen. This is not asking, this is receiving, before the eyes can even confirm it. The way you trust the sun has risen even before you open your curtains to look. The way you trust the ground will hold you even before your foot has fully landed. Imagine, for a moment, that instead of praying, "Please let this work out," a prayer soaked in tension, in doubt, in bracing for disappointment before it has even had the chance to arrive. You prayed instead, "Thank you that this has already worked out, in ways I have not yet been shown, in ways that may surprise me entirely, in ways better than anything I would have known to ask for." Feel the difference in your body between those two sentences, right now, slowly. One tightens the shoulders, pulls the chest inward, narrows the breath until it barely moves at all. The other, almost immediately, softens the jaw, widens something behind the ribs, lets the whole body exhale as though it had been holding its breath for years without ever once realizing it. This is where the journey turns. For so many people who have spent their whole lives asking a universe that was never actually withholding anything to begin with. Not for a single day, not for a single hour. The withholding, if there ever truly was any, lived only in the asking itself, in the subtle message underneath every anxious plea, which whispers, quietly, almost too quiet to notice, "I do not yet have this. I am not yet enough. I am still waiting to be chosen from somewhere outside myself." Gratitude reverses that whisper entirely, gently, completely, without argument. Gratitude says it is already so. It has always already been so. I give thanks for the good already given, unseen but sure. I give thanks for the good already given, unseen but sure. Let your hands, wherever they are resting right now against the sheets, turn slightly upward, palms soft, open, unclenched, the old and ancient gesture of receiving rather than reaching, of trust rather than pursuit, of a heart finally willing to simply hold out its hands and wait. Now, I want to explore what it feels like to say yes to good without straining even a single muscle to make it happen, because there is a particular kind of yes that costs absolutely nothing at all, and it is the only kind that ever actually works. There is a yes that costs everything, the yes that grits its teeth, works 3 extra hours it doesn't have, convinces, negotiates, pushes a boulder up a hill it was never actually meant to carry alone in the first place, a hill that was never even supposed to be climbed that way at all. And then there is another yes entirely, a completely different creature, gentler and quieter, and far more powerful than it first appears, the one Florence Scovel Shinn pointed toward again and again in her quiet, unwavering way, the yes of alignment rather than effort, the yes that simply opens a door already unlocked and walks through it without ever needing to force the hinges, without ever needing to break a sweat or hold its breath while pushing. You have likely spent long seasons of your life believing that good things only arrive through strain, that ease is somehow suspicious, something to distrust, something to brace against because surely there is a catch hiding just behind it, that if it didn't hurt to get here, it probably won't last, it probably isn't real, it probably wasn't meant for you. But watch a river reach the sea. It does not strain. It does not clench its banks in worry about whether it will arrive on schedule. It simply follows the lowest, easiest path available to it, curving where curving is easier, resting where resting is easier, pooling quietly in the shade when the ground asks it to, and it arrives every single time, without exception, without a single day of failure recorded anywhere in its long and patient history, without once needing to prove its own worthiness to the sea. What's particularly powerful about this kind of yes, the soft kind, the aligned kind, is that it doesn't require you to know exactly how something will happen, doesn't require a map drawn out in advance with every turn already accounted for. It only requires you to stop insisting that it must happen the hard way in order to count, in order to be real, in order to be earned through suffering. Grace has never once, not a single time, asked to see your effort receipts before agreeing to help you, never once turned away a soul simply for arriving too easily at its own good. I say yes to my good without struggle, without strain. I say yes to my good without struggle, without strain. Feel your whole body exhale around that sentence, slowly, completely, the way a hand finally releases a fist it forgot it had even been making, finger by finger, until the palm lies open and unguarded, resting against nothing but soft, warm air. Now, I want to explore what happens to the old knots you have been carrying, the ones tied so long ago you no longer even remember tying them, because tonight is where several of them, quietly, without any struggle at all, without any drama whatsoever, finally come undone. There are knots we carry that were never meant to be carried this long, this far, through this many years of quiet, unspoken weight. Old debts, old shames about money, about not having enough, about being seen, at some vulnerable moment, as not enough yourself. Old memories of a moment when there wasn't enough, and someone we loved looked frightened because of it, and something in us decided, right then, in that small, unguarded moment we didn't even know was shaping us, that this was simply how the world worked, that this was the bass note beneath every future note that would ever follow. These knots settle deep into the body and quietly convince it that lack is simply how things are, that scarcity is a fact rather than a passing weather pattern, a storm that moves through and eventually, always, without fail, clears. Florence Scovel Shinn offered one of her most well-known decrees for exactly this kind of knot, a sentence meant to be spoken the way you would finally set down a suitcase you had been gripping in a white-knuckled hand for years, not realizing how heavy it had become, not realizing how much your arm ached, how much your whole body had quietly bent around its weight, until the moment it was finally blessedly empty. I cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free. Notice she did not say, fix this burden, or eventually resolve this burden after enough work, after enough suffering, after enough proof that you had earned relief through hardship. She said cast, a single motion, a release, a letting go into something wiser and larger than the anxious, tired part of you that has been trying to solve this alone, quietly exhausted, for far, far too long, carrying what was never meant to be carried by one set of hands. There is a presence within you fully capable of carrying what you were never actually meant to carry solo, a presence that has been waiting, patiently, without complaint, for you to finally hand it over, the way a strong arm waits beneath a falling weight, before the weight even realizes it has begun to fall. Feel, right now, whatever weight has settled into your chest around money, around not enough, around old fear that never quite left even on the good days, and imagine setting it down gently, not violently, not with drama, not with a great and exhausting show of releasing, just setting it down the way you'd set down a heavy bag at the very end of a long, long day, letting your shoulder finally remember what it feels like to be free of it, to simply hang there, light, at your side. I cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free. I cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free. Let your body actually feel lighter as you repeat it, because it is not a metaphor tonight, not simply pretty words to drift off to before sleep. It is an instruction your nervous system is fully, completely capable of following, right now, in this very moment, without needing to understand a single word of how. Now, I want to explore what happens in the invisible world the moment a burden like that is finally released, because something is already, quietly, being deposited there on your behalf, in a place you cannot yet see, but will in time come to know completely. Long before a thing appears in your hand, it is deposited somewhere unseen. Florence Scovel Shinn described the invisible substance behind all visible supply, the idea that riches exist first in a formless realm of pure possibility before condensing, almost like breath slowly turning to frost on a cold window, into something you can finally hold, spend, or rest inside of, something you can finally feel between your own two fingers. This means that what looks, right now, like nothing happening at all, like silence, like stillness, like a long and uneventful stretch of ordinary days, is very often the exact opposite. It is the quiet, unglamorous middle of something already deposited and already, patiently, on its way to you, moving slower than your impatience would prefer, but faster than your fear would ever admit. You have likely mistaken invisible activity for absence before, the way so many of us do, the way so many of us have been taught to. A seed underground looks, from the surface, exactly like nothing at all. No green, no shoot, no sign of life anywhere, only dark, undisturbed soil. And yet beneath that still dark soil, root systems are working with a patience no impatient eye could ever witness, spreading, gathering strength, preparing for a moment the surface knows absolutely nothing about yet. The same is true of the invisible deposits being made on your behalf right now, tonight, while you rest instead of watch, while you sleep instead of supervise, while your tired eyes finally close instead of straining against the dark for some sign, any sign, that something is happening. The hidden truth about these deposits is that your attention is not required for them to keep working, is not the fuel that moves them forward. You do not have to supervise your own good into existence, standing guard over it the way you might stand guard over a pot that refuses to boil any faster for being watched, refusing, out of some strange stubbornness, to hurry simply because you are staring. It continues whether you are anxiously checking on it or peacefully asleep, and it has always, historically, without a single exception in all of recorded time, moved faster during the peaceful nights than during the anxious, watchful days. My good is already deposited, unseen, and on its way to me. My good is already deposited, unseen, and on its way to me. Let your body soften into that certainty, the way sand softens beneath a slow, incoming tide, grain by grain, without resistance, simply yielding to something larger and more patient than itself, something that has done this 1,000 times before and has never once forgotten how. Now, I want to explore the room inside you where these deposits are held before they arrive, because that room has a door, and the door has never once, not for a single moment, not even in your darkest hour, been locked from the outside. Somewhere within you, quieter than thought, quieter than the quietest part of the night, there is a room that has been holding riches meant for you long before you ever had the eyes to see them, long before you even knew to look, long before you had a single word for what you were even hoping for. It is sealed, not to keep you out, never to keep you out, but to keep the good protected from the doubt, the comparison, the anxious fear that would otherwise wander in uninvited, and disturb it before it was ready to appear fully formed, before it had finished becoming exactly what it needed to be. Florence Scovel Shinn often spoke of the surprises Spirit keeps in store, gifts too specific, too perfectly timed, too tailored exactly to your life, your particular longing, your particular story, to have ever been assembled by mere circumstance or coincidence. This room does not need your worry to guard it. In fact, worry is the one visitor that room was specifically built to keep out, the one guest that room's very walls were designed, from the very first stone, to refuse entry to. When you finally stop pressing your ear against that door, straining to hear whether anything is happening in there, whether the silence means failure or simply means patience, the room continues its quiet work, uninterrupted, undisturbed, exactly as it was always meant to. It is only when we insist on checking constantly, obsessively, running back again and again to test the handle, that we accidentally slow the very process we are so desperately trying to speed up. like opening an oven door 20 times to see if the bread has risen, letting all the careful warmth escape a little more each time we do, wondering why the bread stays flat and dense despite our best, most anxious intentions. There is nothing wrong with you for wanting to check, for wanting proof, for wanting some reassurance you could hold in your hand. It simply is not necessary anymore. The room does not run on your vigilance. It never did, not even in the beginning. It runs on something steadier, older, wiser, and entirely unbothered by your sleep schedule, entirely unbothered by whether you trust it perfectly or only trust it a little, tonight, for the very first time. A sealed room within me holds my good, already prepared. A sealed room within me holds my good, already prepared. Let that room stay closed tonight, undisturbed, fully trusted, the way you'd trust a good and capable friend to finish a task without needing you to hover anxiously over their shoulder the entire time, checking every few minutes whether they've done it right. Now, I want to explore what happens the moment that room finally opens on its own timing, in its own perfect and unhurried way, because what walks out from it rarely resembles what fear expected to find waiting there, and is so often, quietly, so much better. There is an old teaching, spoken plainly by Florence Scovel Shinn, that has quietly rearranged countless lives since she first wrote it down on paper, meant only for her own students, never dreaming how far her simple words would eventually travel. I am an irresistible magnet for all that belongs to me by divine right. Notice the phrase belongs to me. Not everything in the world, not things that were never meant for you, dressed up temptingly to distract you from your own path, borrowed shine from someone else's story. Only what already, truly, structurally belongs to you, the way a key belongs to its particular lock, and could never, under any circumstance, be mistaken for any other, no matter how many other locks it is offered to. A magnet does not chase iron filings desperately across a table, does not run after them, does not beg them to come closer, does not wonder anxiously whether it is doing enough to deserve their attention. It simply exists as itself, faithfully, quietly, magnetically, entirely unconcerned with proving anything, and the filings that belong to its field arrange themselves accordingly, without struggle, without negotiation, without a single ounce of effort spent convincing. You have spent so much of your life chasing opportunities that slipped away the harder you ran, chasing the right people who never quite turned around, chasing the right timing that always seemed to be standing just one step further ahead, when the truth Florence Scovel Shinn pointed toward is so much gentler than any of that chasing ever needed to be. You were never meant to chase. You were only ever meant to become, quietly, magnetically, undeniably yourself, and let what belongs to you find its own patient way home, the way a lost letter always, eventually, finds its address. I am an irresistible magnet for all that belongs to me by divine right. I am an irresistible magnet for all that belongs to me by divine right. Feel your whole body settle into that particular stillness, the stillness of a magnet that never once had to move, never once had to strain, never once had to raise its voice, to do its quiet and certain work. Now I want to explore what happens to the things you have already sent out into the world, the kindness, the faith, the quiet goodwill offered without expectation of return, because none of it, not one single gesture, however small, however unnoticed, has actually been lost. If this is resonating with you so far tonight, a simple like helps me know this, found the right person, the one who was finally, truly ready to hear it, the one this whole journey was quietly built for. Now, let's continue, slowly, together, deeper into the night. There is an old idea, older than any single teacher who ever spoke it, older than the language it was first written in, that whatever you send out eventually finds its way back to you, dressed differently perhaps, arriving through a door you never once expected, wearing a face you didn't recognize at first. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that giving is never truly a loss, never truly a subtraction, because giving plants seeds in a field that has never once, in all of time, forgotten how to grow, no matter how long the season, no matter how quiet the winter. You may have given kindness, patience, forgiveness, money, time, given all of it freely to people who never thanked you, into situations that never resolved the way you had hoped they would, into a silence that felt, for a long time, like it had simply swallowed the gift whole. And some quiet part of you may have concluded, in a tired and lonely moment, that it simply vanished, unrewarded, into nothing at all. But nothing you have ever given in good faith has vanished. Nothing. Not one kindness, not one quiet act of patience, not one moment of grace, extended to someone who didn't seem to notice at the time. It has an address. It knows exactly where you live, exactly how to find you, even after all this time, even after you have long since forgotten giving it. It has simply been traveling, sometimes for far longer than felt comfortable, gathering something like interest along a route your conscious mind was never shown, never permitted to see the map of, never invited to supervise. Tonight, imagine every good thing you have ever sent outward, every honest effort, every quiet act of faith offered without guarantee, finally turning around, addressed clearly, undeniably, unmistakably, to you. Every good I have given is finding its way back to me now. Every good I have given is finding its way back to me now. Let your chest rise gently with that thought, slowly, the way a tide rises without announcement, without fanfare, simply because it is, at long last, time, and the moon has already made its quiet, patient decision. Now I want to explore the very first small signs of a much larger harvest, because they often arrive so quietly, so unassumingly, dressed in such ordinary clothes, that people miss them entirely. Before a whole field ripens into gold, there is always one early sign, a single bud, a single unexpected note left somewhere unlikely, a small kindness from a stranger who will never know what it meant, an idea that arrives out of nowhere and feels oddly, surprisingly complete, arriving fully formed, the way a bird arrives already knowing how to fly. Florence Scovel Shinn taught her students to watch for these small signs without dismissing them too quickly as mere coincidence, without waving them away simply because they seemed too small to matter, because the first fruit is never the whole harvest, but it is always, without exception, proof that the harvest is genuinely, quietly on its way, already moving toward you beneath the surface of ordinary days. Think back over the last weeks of your life, slowly, without rushing, without judging what you find there. Was there a small moment, an unexpected message, an idea that solved something you'd been stuck on for longer than you wanted to admit? A strange sense of relief that arrived without any real explanation, that you brushed past too quickly to notice its deeper meaning, too busy, too tired, too used to overlooking your own good. These are not accidents, they never were. They are the field announcing itself quietly before the larger yield ever appears above the surface for everyone else to see. A farmer does not dismiss the first green shoot simply because it is small, simply because it doesn't yet look like much against the wide, bare field around it. The farmer understands the shoot as proof, evidence that the soil beneath is doing exactly what it was always, patiently, going to do, exactly on schedule, exactly as promised. Tonight, let yourself trust the small signs you have already been given, rather than waiting only for the large and undeniable proof before you allow yourself to feel any peace at all, before you allow yourself even a single quiet moment of rest. I trust the small signs. They prove the larger harvest is near. I trust the small signs. They prove the larger harvest is near. Let your breathing slow around that trust, unhurried, patient, the way soil rests quietly beneath snow all winter, certain, without needing to be told, of the spring that is already coming, already written into the turning of the year itself. Now I want to explore something Florence Scovel Shinn called the deed already recorded, long before the property ever appears in your name, because this small shift changes how you wait entirely, changes the very texture of the waiting itself. In her writing, Florence Scovel Shinn often spoke as though the outcome you desire has already been recorded somewhere, a deed already signed and sealed in the invisible realm, awaiting only its quiet appearance in the visible one, the way a letter awaits only the final step of delivery once it has already, truly, been written and sent. This is a strange kind of comfort, if you let it truly land, if you let it settle all the way down past the doubting surface of the mind. It means the waiting you are doing right now, tonight, is not waiting for something to be decided, is not standing anxiously outside some courtroom, wondering how the verdict will fall. It is only waiting for something already decided to finally become visible to your physical eyes, to step, at last, out of the unseen and into the light. Consider how differently you would wait for a package you knew, with total and complete certainty, was already shipped and already correctly addressed to your door, versus a package you weren't even sure had been ordered in the first place. The waiting itself changes entirely, doesn't it? Changes its whole temperature. One waiting is anxious, checking the window every hour, pacing near the door, jumping at every sound outside. The other waiting is almost peaceful, even a little amused by its own patience, because you already know it's coming. You're simply watching, curiously, almost playfully, for the day it chooses to arrive on its own schedule. The hidden truth about your own good is that its deed, so to speak, was recorded the moment you finally stopped fighting it and started, however quietly, however imperfectly, believing it. From that moment forward, the appearing is only a matter of timing, and timing has never once, not in all your life, not in a single instance you could name, been something you were required to control. My good is already recorded. I am only waiting for its appearing. My good is already recorded. I am only waiting for its appearing. Let your hands unclench now, wherever they have been holding tension without you even noticing, tension that has been quietly there for longer than you realized, because packages that are already shipped do not need to be pushed along by worried, restless hands reaching anxiously toward the door. Now, I want to explore what happens the moment you finally loosen your grip on how this must arrive. Because grip, oddly enough, has always been the one thing that slows a shipment down, the one obstacle standing between you and the very thing you are waiting for. There is a peculiar law running quietly underneath everything Florence Scovel Shinn ever taught. In every book, every lecture, every quiet conversation with a struggling student who came to her convinced their situation was somehow the exception, the tighter the grip, the slower the good arrives. Almost as if the universe respects your closed hand completely and waits patiently, without judgment, without impatience of its own, for you to actually open it before placing anything inside. You may have spent years believing that gripping tightly to a specific outcome was the same thing as faith, the same thing as commitment, the same thing as caring enough to make it happen. But faith, true faith, does not grip at all. Faith opens its hand and simply trusts the palm will be filled, in its own way, in its own perfect time, without needing to be forced, without needing to be squeezed into shape. Notice, right now, Any place in your body where you are still holding on tightly, your jaw, your shoulders, the backs of your hands curled slightly without your permission, even your breath itself held just a little too carefully, a little too cautiously, as if letting it move too freely might somehow cost you something. This gripping was never actually protecting your good. It was, without meaning to, without you ever choosing it consciously, blocking the very door through which your good was quietly trying to enter, standing directly in its own way, without ever realizing it. A hand clenched into a fist cannot receive anything new. It can only continue holding what little it already has, exhausted, unable to reach for more, unable to open toward anything better, however close that better thing might already be standing. Let your grip loosen now, slowly, finger by finger, not because you are giving up on anything, not because you no longer care how this turns out, but because you finally, truly trust there is something worth opening your hand for, something already on its way that simply needs an open palm to land in. I loosen my grip and let my good come easily to me. I loosen my grip and let my good come easily to me. Feel your whole hand soften into the mattress, into the sheets, into rest itself, open, unguarded, and entirely unafraid, entirely willing, for the first time in a long time, to simply receive. Now, I want to explore just how wide the field actually is that your good comes from, because so many people quietly, unknowingly believe it is smaller than it has ever truly been, smaller than it could ever actually be. Somewhere along the way, many of us absorbed a quiet, unspoken belief that there is only so much good to go around, that someone else's abundance is somehow taken directly from a shared, shrinking pile, and that if they have more, there must, mathematically, be less remaining for you, less waiting on the shelf by the time you finally arrive. Florence Scovel Shinn rejected this idea entirely, completely, without exception, without ever once softening her stance on it. She taught of a supply so vast it cannot be depleted by anyone else's good fortune, a field with no fences anywhere, no competition, no scarcity built into its structure at all, from the very beginning, from the very first seed ever planted in it. Imagine, tonight, that field stretching in every direction farther than your eyes could ever hope to travel, gold and endless under a soft and glowing sky, with more than enough room for everyone you have ever quietly envied, everyone whose success once made your own dreams feel smaller by comparison, quieter, less possible, further away than they actually ever were. Their harvest was never subtracted from yours. Not once, not by a single grain. It simply grew in its own section of a field, wide enough to hold every dream that has ever been dreamed by anyone, anywhere, without ever once running short, without ever once needing to ration itself against the next person's hope. What's particularly powerful about trusting this width, this endlessness, this field without a single fence anywhere in sight, is that envy quietly dissolves on its own, without force, without a single argument required, and in its place arrives something far more useful, far more freeing, genuine excitement for others, because their good is now proof of the field's endless capacity, not evidence of your own shortage, not a subtraction from some imaginary total that was never real to begin with. There is more than enough room in this field for me too. There is more than enough room in this field for me too. Let your chest widen with that field, expansive, unhurried, unafraid of anyone else's harvest standing anywhere nearby, unthreatened by a single stalk of someone else's gold. Now I want to explore what happens the moment you knock, quietly, without demanding anything, on a door you have wondered about for a long time, because something on the other side has been listening, patiently, for exactly that knock, for longer than you might imagine. There is an old promise, one Florence Scovel Shinn returned to often in her teaching, drawing from something even older than herself, that whoever asks receives, whoever seeks finds, and whoever knocks discovers the door was never actually locked at all, only closed, waiting patiently for the simple motion of a hand, willing to finally try it, willing to risk one more disappointment for the sake of finding out. So much of our lives are spent assuming certain doors are locked without ever actually testing the handle, convinced by old disappointment, by one hard no from long ago that still echoes somewhere quiet inside us, that trying again would only prove the same old painful story true once more, that hope itself is simply a setup for another small grief. But the story does not have to repeat, simply because it repeated before, simply because it has always gone that way until now. Tonight, imagine yourself standing before a door you have quietly given up on, a door labeled something like more than enough, or finally at ease, or simply, this works out for me too, and instead of walking past it the way you have 100 times before, eyes averted, shoulders already braced for the disappointment you expect, imagine your hand resting gently on the handle, no force required, no dramatic push needed, just a soft, willing, curious turn, the kind a child gives a door, simply because they are still innocent enough to expect it might open. The hidden truth about this door is that it was designed, from its very hinges, to respond to gentleness rather than force, to yield to trust rather than to pressure. Doors like this do not open for people who slam them, who kick at them in frustration, who demand entry through sheer force of will. They open, quietly and completely, for people who simply, finally, trust enough to try, softly, without bracing, without expecting to be turned away. I knock gently, and the door opens completely for me. I knock gently, and the door opens completely for me. Let your whole body feel that opening now. Warm air moving softly through a space that has been closed for far too long, finally free to breathe again, finally free to move without resistance from one room into the next. Now, I want to explore what happens the moment the key finally turns in a lock that has felt stuck for years, because the stuckness was very rarely, if ever, about the lock itself, and almost always about something else entirely. For a long while, certain areas of your life may have felt stuck, immovable, frozen in place, no matter how much you pushed, no matter how many angles you tried. A plan that would not move forward no matter how you pushed against it. A decision that stayed frozen for months, even years, hovering there unresolved while everything else around it kept moving. A resource that seemed permanently, stubbornly, just out of reach, close enough to see, but never quite close enough to hold. Florence Scovel Shinn often reminded her readers that what looks stuck on the outside is very often simply waiting for an inner turn first, a quiet change in belief that must happen before the outer key can ever move freely in its lock, before the mechanism can finally, smoothly release. You cannot force a rusted lock by pushing harder against the same old key, no matter how much strength you apply, no matter how much frustration you pour into the effort. But you can oil the lock. You can wait, patiently, without panic, without demanding the lock explain itself. You can trust that a little patience, a little softness, accomplishes what force never could, not in 100 attempts, not in 1,000. So often, what we call being stuck is actually only timing, wearing the disguise of a permanent problem, convincing us it will never change, when really, it is simply waiting for its moment, quietly, patiently, behind the scenes. The lock was never truly broken. It simply hadn't been given the right pressure yet. Not more force, never more force, but less resistance, less clenching, less desperate turning. Tonight, imagine that stuck area of your life as a lock finally receiving oil instead of force, softening slowly, easing gently, the tumblers inside quietly falling into place one by one, without a single hard push from you, without a single clenched muscle, without a single moment of strain. The lock is softening now, and my way opens easily. The lock is softening now, and my way opens easily. Feel that ease travel slowly down through your shoulders, your hips, your legs, releasing tension you didn't even realize. Until this very moment, you were still quietly holding there. Tension you had carried for so long, it had simply become part of how you stood, how you sat, how you breathed. Now I want to explore what it feels like when a cup that has felt only half full for years is finally, quietly, filled past its own brim, overflowing in ways it was always meant to. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that divine order is established in the mind, the body, and the affairs, a threefold order, meaning the fullness you have longed for is never meant to arrive in only one part of your life, while the rest remains untouched, unchanged, still thirsty, still waiting its turn. Wealth was never meant to mean only money. It was always meant to mean a cup so full in every single direction that it simply overflows without effort, without strain, into every corner of your living, every relationship, every quiet morning, every ordinary Tuesday. Think of your life as that cup, right now, tonight, resting in your own two hands. For a long while, perhaps, it has felt exactly half full, carefully rationed, sipped from cautiously, refilled only just in time to avoid running dry, always managed, always monitored, always measured against some invisible line you were afraid to cross. But a cup held beneath grace does not operate by careful rationing, does not measure itself against fear's careful calculations. It fills, and it keeps filling, past the point that seems reasonable, past the point your old fear insists is safe, simply because that is what cups do when they are held beneath a source that never once, not for a single moment, considers turning off, considers holding back, considers rationing what was always meant to be given freely. Let yourself imagine, tonight, your own cup filling, not just with money, though certainly that too, certainly that as well, generously, without apology, but with ease, with laughter, with rest, with relationships that finally feel effortless instead of exhausting, with a body that finally softens all the way into peace, all the way down to the bone. Divine order fills my mind, my body, and my affairs completely. Divine order fills my mind, my body, and my affairs completely. Let that overflow spill quietly over every part of you now, warm and unhurried, exactly like water finding its own patient level, filling every low place without being asked, without needing permission, simply because that is what water, given time, always does. Now, I want to explore the long way you have already traveled to get here, because it was never actually, not for a single mile of it, a detour, not a single wasted year, not a single wrong turn. There is a particular kind of grief many of us carry quietly, almost secretly, about the long way, the years that felt wasted, the paths that seemed to lead absolutely nowhere, the choices that in hindsight looked like mistakes, rather than necessary steps toward exactly where you are tonight. Florence Scovel Shinn often spoke of the straight and narrow way, not as a moral instruction meant to shame you for the winding path you actually walked, but as a quiet promise that once you truly release the old grip, the road itself begins straightening ahead of you, and the miles that once felt endless begin closing in far faster than they should reasonably be able to, faster than logic alone could ever explain. Consider, tonight, slowly, without rushing past any part of it, that every winding turn you have taken was not wasted time at all, but necessary preparation, a lesson your hands needed before they could hold what is coming, a strength your spirit needed to build before it could carry the weight of receiving fully, without breaking under the sudden fullness of it, without buckling beneath a gift too large for hands that hadn't yet learned how to hold it. The long way was not punishment. It never was. Not for one single day of it. It was training you couldn't yet see the purpose of at the time. The way a river bends patiently through hills before it finally reaches open water. And every bend, even the frustrating ones, even the ones that felt like failure, even the ones you still wince to remember, was quietly shaping the riverbed for the wide, straight stretch still ahead. The stretch you are only now, tonight, beginning to approach. Let the road ahead straighten now in your mind's eye, gently, without force. The long detours behind you finally making sense. Finally, at long last, worth it. Finally, quietly, forgiven. My road is straightening now, and I arrive sooner than I think. My road is straightening now, and I arrive sooner than I think. Feel your whole body exhale into that shorter distance, that quicker arrival, that road no longer bending endlessly away from you, no longer stretching further every time you look toward the horizon. Now I want to explore something even older than the road itself, the inheritance that was recorded in your name long before you ever set out walking it, long before you even knew a road was there to walk. There is an old teaching Florence Scovel Shinn returned to more than once in her writing, borrowed from far older scripture still, older than any single book. In the Father's house there are many rooms, more than enough, prepared long before you ever arrived to ask about them, long before you knew to knock, long before you even suspected such a house existed with your name already written somewhere inside it. This is not merely a promise about some distant afterlife alone, tucked away for later, for some other time, some other version of you. It is a present promise, meaning that even now, in this life, in this present moment, tonight, there exists an inheritance already prepared and waiting, with your name quietly written on far more doors than you have ever bothered to open, far more than you have even walked past. You are not a beggar standing outside a stranger's house, hoping desperately for scraps thrown from a window by someone else's generosity. You are an heir, walking hallways that were built with you specifically in mind, doors already unlocked long ago, rooms already furnished and waiting, simply waiting for you to stop assuming you don't belong here and actually walk inside, unafraid, unapologetic, entirely at home. The hidden truth about inheritance is that it does not need to be earned through suffering, through proving yourself worthy again and again through hardship and struggle. It only needs to be accepted, calmly, quietly, the way you'd accept a gift, clearly labeled with your own name, already written on the tag, no explanation required, no justification needed. Let yourself walk, tonight, slowly, down that long golden hallway, past door after door, each one glowing softly from within, each one already, undeniably yours, each one simply waiting for the moment you finally, quietly, decide to try the handle. I am the heir. My inheritance is already prepared and waiting. I am the heir. My inheritance is already prepared and waiting. Let your whole body settle into that hallway now, safe, expected, fully welcomed exactly as you are, with nothing needing to be different first, nothing needing to be proven before you are allowed to simply arrive. Now, I want to explore the single sentence this entire night has been quietly, patiently building toward, because everything so far has simply been preparing the ground for it, softening the soil for one final seed. Everything we have walked through tonight, the claim, the thread, the storehouse, the burden finally set down, the magnet, the wide and endless field, the door opening softly on its hinges, the inheritance already prepared, has been quietly circling one single truth. The truth every teaching Florence Scovel Shinn ever offered was ultimately, patiently pointing toward, the one truth beneath all the others. Not that wealth is something you chase, or earn through suffering, or eventually deserve after enough proof has been gathered and presented. But that wealth, in its truest and most complete form, is not separate from you at all, was never separate from you, not for a single moment of your existence. It was never something out there, waiting to be captured through effort, hunted down and finally, exhaustedly, claimed. It has always been an expression of the very source you are made from, appearing now, quietly, completely, through you, as you, indistinguishable from your own breath. This is where the journey turns for the very last time tonight. Not toward more effort, not toward more waiting, not toward more striving in the dark, toward some distant and uncertain shore, but toward a quiet, total identification with the very thing you have been seeking all along, the thing you were never actually separate from, not even for one single day of your searching. You are not separate from supply. You were never separate from it, not for one single day of your life, not even in the years it felt furthest away. The river does not chase the sea, does not strain toward it, does not doubt its own arrival. It simply is the sea, moving, expressing, fully alive within its own banks, never once doubting, not even for a moment, where it belongs, where it has always belonged. Let this settle now, all the way down, past thought, past doubt, past every old fear that ever visited you in the dark and asked to stay the night, into the very quiet center where sleep is about to take you completely, gently, all the way under. I am the wealth of God, appearing now as me. I am the wealth of God, appearing now as me. Let that sentence become the last room you walk into tonight, warm, golden, complete, needing absolutely nothing further to be added to it, needing nothing more than for you to simply rest inside it. If you have stayed with me all the way to this moment, something in you was genuinely, truly ready for this tonight, and that readiness was never an accident, never a coincidence, never anything less than an appointment quietly kept. If this journey found you the way it was always meant to, consider staying close to this voice by subscribing, quietly, the way you'd keep a lamp lit in a familiar and welcoming room, ready for the next time you need to find your way back here. And before you drift the rest of the way into sleep, if you would, leave the word wealth in the comments below, just that single word, wealth. So I know exactly who walked this quiet road with me tonight, who let these words settle all the way down. If this helped carry you somewhere softer than where you started this evening, a like lets me know to keep making more of these journeys for you, more nights like this one. And when you wake, rested and lighter than you have felt in some time, there is another journey already waiting for you, whenever you're ready to walk it, whenever the next night calls you back here. For now, simply rest. You are already home. Poverty ran in her family for 3 generations. She ended it with one decree. Florence Scovel Shinn. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that no family pattern, however old, however repeated, however wept over by grandmothers and mothers and daughters before you, is stronger than one true word spoken in faith by a person who has finally seen who they really are. There is a verse in the Psalms that Florence Scovel Shinn returned to again and again in her own teaching, the 35th Psalm, where it says, "Let the Lord be magnified, which hath pleasure in the prosperity of his servant." Read that again slowly. Which hath pleasure in the prosperity of his servant, not the poverty of his servant, not the struggle of his servant, not the debt of his servant, the prosperity, the joy, the abundance. And here is the line that should undo something old in you. If the very source of all supply takes pleasure in your prosperity, then every lean year your family called normal, every scarcity your bloodline called fate, was never the will of the giver, it was only the belief of the receiver, and beliefs, unlike blood, are not passed down against your will. They are only passed down until someone in the line finally says no more. And today, in this quiet space between one thought and the next, you are being given the chance to be that someone, not through effort, not through striving, but through the simple, decisive act of recognizing what has actually been true all along. That supply was never withheld, it was only ever unclaimed. So before we go further, let us plant our feet on new ground together with words, because Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the spoken word is the wand that turns thought into thing. So say this with me now, out loud if you can, quietly if you must, but say it as if you mean to end something today. I am the one in whom the old story stops. Supply flows to me now and through me now. My word is my wand. Say it with me. I am the one in whom the old story stops. Supply flows to me now and through me now. My word is my wand. Again, once more. Let it settle into you this time. I am the one in whom the old story stops. Supply flows to me now and through me now. My word is my wand. Before we walk through the keys together, I want you to do one small thing that will mean more than it looks like it means. Type the words God supplies in the comments right now. Not as a wish, not as a hope, but as a statement. God supplies. Because Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we make our unspoken word visible the moment we dare to write it down or say it aloud. And a comment section full of the words God supplies becomes a kind of chorus, a company of witnesses agreeing together that the old pattern is over. So go ahead, type it now, God supplies, and then let us begin. The first key is this. The chain breaks the moment you stop defending it. Listen carefully to that, because most people who come from a long line of lack spend their whole lives defending the lack instead of ending it. They say, well, my mother struggled, and her mother before her struggled, so I suppose this is simply how it is for people like us. And Florence Scovel Shinn would stop a woman right there and say, my dear, you are not describing your family, you are decreeing your future. Every time you repeat the old story with feeling, you are speaking a new law over your own life. The subconscious mind does not know the difference between a memory and a command. It simply obeys whatever is spoken over it with conviction. So when you say we have never had money in this family, you are not reporting history. You are writing tomorrow's check and signing your name to it. This is why the very first thing that must happen, before any technique, before any affirmation, before any prayer, is that you must stop giving your breath to the old story. You do not have to fight your grandmother's belief. You do not have to argue with your mother's fear. You simply stop repeating it as if it were your own law, because it is not your law unless you keep signing it. A woman I want you to imagine, we will simply call her the woman with the decree, grew up watching envelopes stack unopened on a kitchen counter, watching her mother's shoulders drop every time the phone rang near the end of the month, and she absorbed a picture long before she ever earned $1 of her own. The picture said, money is scarce here, money is a source of fear here, money always runs out here, and she carried that picture quietly into her own adult life without ever once questioning it. Until the day she read those words, which hath pleasure in the prosperity of his servant, and something in her simply refused to keep signing the old contract. She did not scream it, she did not perform it, she simply stopped repeating the sentence, "We have never had money in this family," and began saying instead, "Supply has always been here, we simply had not learned to receive it yet." That single substitution, spoken with feeling, was the crack in the chain, because Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the subconscious mind is like fertile soil. It grows whatever seed you drop into it, whether that seed is fear or faith. And for 3 generations, the seed dropped into that soil had been the same tired seed of lack. But soil does not care how long it has grown weeds. The moment you drop a different seed into it, it begins, without argument, without hesitation, to grow the new thing. Notice too how ordinary this moment can look from the outside. No one applauded her. No one even noticed at first. She simply stopped saying the old sentence at the dinner table, stopped repeating it to co-workers as a kind of self-deprecating joke, stopped explaining her financial choices by reaching backward into her mother's story. And in the quiet absence of that old sentence, something new had room to grow. Consider how many small daily moments actually carry this old sentence without our even noticing. The joke at a family gathering about how nobody in this family can hold on to $1, the sigh over a grocery receipt that says some things never change, the resigned laugh when a bill arrives that says, of course, right on time. Every one of these small moments is a tiny renewal of the old signature, and every one of them can simply be left unsigned. This is often how the chain actually breaks, not with fireworks, but with a simple withdrawal of consent, repeated daily until the withdrawal itself becomes the new habit. So hear this clearly. You do not need permission from your ancestors to prosper. You do not need your family's blessing to believe in supply. The chain breaks the moment you personally stop defending it as your identity and begin speaking, quietly, steadily, as if you already know better, because you do. The second key is this: you must deny the old claim before the new claim can stand. Florence Scovel Shinn taught a very specific spiritual tool she called denial. And she did not mean denial in the sense we use casually today, pretending a problem does not exist. She meant something far more precise. She meant refusing to give a false condition the authority of truth. She would say, "Deny it has any power over you," and then affirm the truth that cancels it. This two-step motion, denial and then affirmation, was for her one of the most practical tools in all of Scripture, because the Bible itself is full of this pattern. Over and over, the Old Testament shows a people first tearing down an altar to a false god before they ever build an altar to the true one. You cannot build the new house while the old house still stands on the same plot of ground. So consider what this looks like in an ordinary week. Imagine a man whose father always said, "We are simply not the kind of people money sticks to." And the son grew up watching money slip through his hands, exactly the way it slipped through his father's. Bonuses spent before they arrived. Savings accounts opened and quietly drained. A pattern so consistent, it felt less like coincidence and more like inheritance. And one evening, tired of watching the same story repeat, he sat down and did something almost embarrassingly simple. He spoke out loud, alone in his kitchen. "I deny that money slips through my hands. That was never true of me. That was only ever a sentence I agreed to believe." And then, in the very next breath, he spoke the replacement. "Money comes to me easily now, and stays with me gladly, and multiplies in my keeping." Notice the shape of it, the denial first, clearing the ground, and the affirmation second, planting the new seed in the cleared ground. Florence Scovel Shinn was insistent that you cannot simply affirm your way over an unaddressed denial, because the old belief, left standing quietly in the background, will keep pulling your conditions back toward itself, like a rubber band snapping back to its resting shape. You have to consciously, deliberately, out loud if possible, cancel the old claim. "I deny this has power over me. I deny that lack is my family's fate. I deny that struggle is written into my story, and then immediately replace it. Supply is my native air. Prosperity is my inheritance from the true source. Ease is now normal for me. This is not simply positive thinking. Positive thinking so often skips the denial and tries to paper over an unaddressed wound with a cheerful sentence, and the old wound keeps leaking through underneath it. Florence Scovel Shinn's method was more honest than that. She asked you to look directly at the old belief, name it plainly, refuse it its authority in plain words, and only then plant the new word in the cleared space. Think of pulling a weed all the way out by the root before you plant a rose in the same soil. If you simply plant the rose on top of the weed keeps growing underneath. This is why so many people affirm prosperity for years, with so little visible change. They are planting good seed on top of an unpulled weed, and this is worth sitting with a little longer, because it explains something that puzzles a great many sincere students of prosperity teaching. They memorize beautiful affirmations, they speak lovely words about abundance, and yet nothing changes. And the reason so often is that they have never once directly denied the specific old claim underneath. They have skipped straight to the flowers without ever pulling the weed. Consider also how this looks in the smallest transactions of daily life. A woman standing at a checkout counter, feeling a flutter of anxiety as the total rings up. That flutter is the old claim trying to renew itself in that exact moment. And she can, right there, silently, deny it, this fear is not mine, and affirm in the same breath, supply always meets me at the register. Small moments like this, repeated many times across a single week, do more to retrain the subconscious than one dramatic ceremony ever could. Because Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the mind is trained the way any habit is trained, through repetition in the actual small circumstances of daily life, not merely through grand declarations spoken once and then forgotten. So this week, find the one sentence your family always said about money, the one you can practically hear in a parent's or grandparent's voice. Perhaps it is money does not grow on trees. Perhaps it is we have to be careful. We are not like other families. Perhaps it is something never spoken quite so plainly, but felt in every tightened jaw around the subject. Whatever it is, speak the denial over it plainly, out loud, alone if you must. I deny that this is true of me now. And then plant your new sentence in its place, and speak that new sentence as though your word were in fact a wand, because it is. The third key is this: the subconscious mind is soil, and soil has no opinion about what it grows. Florence Scovel Shinn returned to this image constantly because she wanted her students to stop treating their inner life as a fixed personality and start treating it as living, responsive ground, ground that will produce squash if you plant squash and will produce roses if you plant roses, but will never once refuse a seed on the basis of what grew there last season. This is enormously good news for anyone who has ever felt trapped by a family reputation, because it means the soil of your own mind does not remember 3 generations of lack the way you remember it. It does not hold a grudge. It does not insist on repeating history out of loyalty. It simply grows whatever is planted today, with full and complete cooperation. Consider how differently this feels from the way most people talk about breaking a pattern. So often we hear language like fighting the pattern, battling the old belief, wrestling free of the family curse. And all of that language, however well meant, keeps the old thing in the center of the picture, still large, still powerful, still worth wrestling. But Florence Scovel Shinn's approach was gentler and in some ways far more radical. She did not ask her students to battle the old belief at all. She asked them to simply stop feeding it and start feeding something else. Because a garden untended by fresh planting does not stay the same, It does not merely hold its old crop in place, waiting for you to return to your senses. It slowly returns to bare ground, and bare ground is receptive ground. So picture a woman, we can call her the gardener, who noticed that every time she thought about her finances, her mind would automatically walk down a very old, very worn path, a path that led straight to her mother's kitchen table and the sound of bills being sorted with a sigh. And for years she assumed this automatic walk meant something was simply wrong with her, that she was permanently wired for worry. But once she understood the soil teaching, she stopped trying to forcibly block the old thought, and instead began, every single time she noticed herself walking that worn path, gently turning her attention toward a fresh one, she would say, quietly, right there in the moment, that was the old path. Here is the new one. Supply meets me at every turn. And at first this felt almost silly, like whispering to an empty room. But soil does not require you to believe the seed will grow before it agrees to grow it. Soil simply responds to what is planted, consistently, patiently, without asking your permission first. So within a matter of weeks, she noticed the old path was harder to find, overgrown, while the new path, walked daily, had become the easy one, the automatic one, the one her mind now reached for first. This is the practical shape of what Florence Scovel Shinn meant when she said we are gardeners of our own consciousness. You are not required to uproot every old weed by force. You are simply required to keep planting the new seed more consistently than the old seed was ever planted. And remember this especially if you come from a family where lack was discussed daily, at every meal, in every worried phone call, because that means the old seed was planted with tremendous frequency. So the new seed must be planted with at least that much frequency. Not once, not as a single dramatic decree and then forgotten, but daily, morning and evening, the way any devoted gardener tends a garden they actually intend to harvest from. Think also of how a gardener does not judge the seed by how the soil currently looks. A gardener does not stand over cracked, dry earth and declare nothing will ever grow here again. A gardener simply plants, waters, and trusts the process that has never once failed since the beginning of time. Your mind is exactly this reliable, exactly this cooperative, and it is simply waiting for you to plant, with the same faith a gardener extends to ordinary dirt. Consider too how a gardener understands seasons. Some seeds sprout within days, and some seem to take much longer, lying quietly beneath the surface before any green shows at all. And a gardener does not dig up the seed daily to check whether it is working. Digging it up only disturbs the very roots trying to take hold. In the same way, once you have planted a new thought, a new word, a new claim over your finances, resist the urge to dig it up hourly with worry or doubt, asking, is it working yet? Is it working yet? Trust it the way you would trust a seed left quietly in the dark earth. Say to yourself each morning, before your feet even hit the floor, this is a new day in fertile soil. I plant supply. I plant ease. I plant good. And say it again each evening before sleep, because sleep is when soil does its quietest, deepest work, and what you plant right before rest often takes root the fastest of all. Let this become a rhythm rather than an event. Because Florence Scovel Shinn taught that consistency, not intensity, is what actually transforms soil that has grown weeds for a very long time. The fourth key is this: you can only receive what your concept of yourself allows you to hold. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that self-concept is the quiet architect behind every condition in a person's life, more decisive even than circumstance, more decisive even than effort, because two people can be handed the very same opportunity, the very same sum of money, the very same open door, and one will walk through it easily, while the other will somehow, almost without noticing how, let it slip away. And the difference is never luck. The difference is what each of them secretly believes about who they are, and what people like them are permitted to hold on to. This matters enormously when we are talking about a family pattern of lack, because what actually gets inherited is rarely a literal shortage of money. What actually gets inherited is a self-concept, a quiet, often unspoken sense of, I am the kind of person things do not work out for. I am the kind of person who almost gets there and then loses it. I am the kind of person money passes by. And that self-concept, once absorbed in childhood, behaves exactly like a container. It does not matter how much supply is poured toward a person. If their inner container is shaped like lack, the overflow simply spills out somewhere, an unexpected expense, a bad decision made in a hurry, a generous impulse offered at exactly the wrong moment. The money finds its way back out because the container was never reshaped to hold it. And this is worth pausing on because so many people work tirelessly to increase their income while never once addressing the shape of the container receiving it. And so the income rises for a season and then mysteriously falls back to its old familiar level, as though pulled by gravity. This is what some call the thermostat of the self-concept, set once, often in childhood, and quietly maintaining whatever temperature of prosperity it was set to, regardless of how hard the outer circumstances try to push past it. Notice how this thermostat shows up in ordinary moments. A person receives a small windfall, a tax refund, a gift, an unexpected bonus, and within days, almost mysteriously, an equally sized expense appears to absorb it. A car repair, a sudden medical bill, a broken appliance, and the person shrugs and says, "That is just how it always goes for me," not realizing that the thermostat, set to an old temperature, simply corrected the room back to its accustomed setting. This is why Florence Scovel Shinn insisted that the real work is never really about money at all. It is about becoming, in your own quiet self-image, the kind of person prosperity naturally belongs to. And here we must speak carefully about something that sounds dramatic but is actually gentle. Sometimes this process feels like a kind of death, and that word should not frighten you, because what is dying is never you. What is dying is the false, borrowed self that was never really yours to begin with, the anxious, inherited self that flinched at every bill. That self is not your true identity. It was only a costume handed to you before you were old enough to refuse it. And when that costume finally falls away, it can feel briefly like loss, like grief, like something ending. But what is actually happening is that the real self, the self that was always whole, always provided for, always connected to the true unlimited source, is simply being set free from underneath it. Think of a woman who spent years quietly believing, without ever saying it plainly even to herself, that she was the responsible one who cleans up everyone else's financial messes. That role had been handed to her early, an oldest daughter watching parents struggle, learning to be the steady one, the one who never asks for help, the one who manages, and for years that identity felt noble, even necessary, but it also quietly kept her exhausted, kept her earning just enough to patch holes and never enough to overflow, because her self-concept was built entirely around managing scarcity rather than receiving abundance. When she finally recognized this, she did not need to punish herself or feel foolish for having believed it so long. She simply began speaking a new self-concept into place. Plainly, deliberately, I am not the manager of lack. I am the receiver of abundant supply. I am provided for richly and completely. And slowly, as that new sentence took root, her outer life began rearranging itself to match it. Opportunities she would once have overlooked began catching her attention. A raise she might once have talked herself out of requesting became a conversation she initiated calmly. A friend's generous offer that she might once have deflected out of a habit of self-reliance became something she allowed herself to simply receive, and even the small daily gestures changed, where once she might have automatically picked up every check at a meal to prove she needed no help. She found herself able to let someone else pay without any flicker of guilt or discomfort. A small thing, perhaps, but a telling one, because self-concept reveals itself in exactly these small, unwatched moments. None of this happened because circumstances suddenly changed. It happened because the container had changed, and circumstances, as Florence Scovel Shinn taught, always eventually rearrange themselves to match the inner state. This is what she meant when she said, conditions are the outer picture of an inner state. Your bank balance is not first. Your self-concept is first. And the balance simply follows, sometimes with a small delay, sometimes almost immediately, but always faithfully. So ask yourself honestly this week, if I strip away every circumstance, every bill, every worry, who do I actually believe I am underneath it all? And if the honest answer sounds anything like the old family story, gently, without drama, without force, begin speaking the truer identity in its place. I am the one who was always meant to overflow. I am the one the source delights to prosper. My word is my wand. And let that identity, spoken steadily, become the new container your supply is finally free to fill. The fifth key is this. There is such a thing as the right idea, and it is always available, waiting to be received. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that behind every situation there exists what she called the divine idea, the perfect solution already complete, already whole, already present in the mind of the true source. And our work is never to manufacture supply through sheer effort, but simply to become receptive enough to receive the idea that is already there waiting for us. This reframes the entire conversation about money in the most freeing way possible, because so many people who come from generations of lack develop an exhausting relationship with effort. They believe, quietly, that they must work twice as hard as everyone else, simply to arrive at an ordinary result, that supply must be wrestled out of a stingy universe through sheer grinding force, and this belief, however sincere, however admirable it looks from the outside, actually blocks the very receptivity that lets right ideas flow in, because a mind clenched in effort and worry is a mind too noisy to hear the quiet idea trying to reach it. Consider a man who spent years working 2 and sometimes 3 jobs, not because the ideas were poor, but because he simply did not believe supply could arrive any other way. Exhaustion had become, without his noticing, a kind of proof to himself that he deserved whatever came his way, as though suffering were the toll he had to pay before he was allowed any good thing. And one ordinary afternoon, sitting quietly for once instead of rushing between jobs, an idea arrived, simple, almost embarrassingly obvious once he saw it, a small adjustment to a skill he already had, offered to people he already knew, that within a matter of months brought in more than both of his exhausting jobs combined. The idea had likely been available to him for years, but a mind constantly straining could not hear it. It took one quiet afternoon of actual stillness for it to land. This is why Florence Scovel Shinn taught her students to pray specifically for right ideas rather than simply praying for money, because money is only ever the outer form. The idea is the substance. Praying, "Let me not miss my right idea today," opens a kind of listening in the mind that ordinary striving actually closes. And this listening is not passive. It does not mean sitting back and waiting for supply to simply appear without any action on your part. It means becoming quiet enough, unclenched enough, faithful enough, to recognize the idea when it arrives, and then acting on it promptly and without hesitation, because an idea recognized but not acted upon is like a seed left sitting on top of the soil instead of planted into it. It will not grow, no matter how good the seed was. So build into your days a small pocket of genuine quiet, even 5 minutes, where you simply say, "Source of all supply, show me my right idea today," and then actually listen. Notice what small nudge arrives, the phone call you feel drawn to make, the person you feel drawn to speak with, the door that quietly opens that you almost talked yourself out of walking through. These are so often the disguised form the right idea takes, arriving not as a thunderclap, but as a quiet suggestion easily dismissed by a busy, anxious mind. And this is especially important for anyone breaking a family pattern of struggle, because struggle trains a person to distrust ease, to feel suspicious of anything that arrives without great effort. A person raised in scarcity often unconsciously sabotages an easy solution simply because it does not feel like it was earned properly. Imagine a woman offered a straightforward, well-paying opportunity that required far less effort than she was accustomed to, and imagine the strange discomfort she felt accepting it, a nagging sense that it could not possibly be legitimate if it did not exhaust her the way work always had before. This discomfort is not wisdom, it is simply the old family thermostat resisting a temperature it has never experienced. And the remedy is not to manufacture unnecessary struggle to make the opportunity feel earned. The remedy is to speak plainly. Ease is allowed. Ease is in fact the natural order of supply, and I welcome it without suspicion. Florence Scovel Shinn was clear. Ease is not a sign that something is wrong. Ease is very often the signature of a right idea, working exactly as it was designed to work. And she would remind her students often that the source of supply is not stingy, is not slow, is not reluctant. The source is instead endlessly generous and endlessly inventive, forever offering fresh ideas to any mind, quiet enough to receive them. So let your prayer this week be simple and specific, not a general plea for more money, but a direct request. Show me the idea. And then, when it comes, however small, however unassuming, however unlike what you expected, act on it promptly and in faith. The sixth key is this: forgiveness toward your family is not sentiment, it is spiritual plumbing. Florence Scovel Shinn taught, plainly and often, that unforgiveness is one of the most common hidden blocks to supply, more common by far than most people realize. Because resentment, even the quiet kind, even the kind so old it no longer feels like anger but simply feels like fact, keeps a person energetically bound to the very condition they resent. This matters enormously here, because breaking a generational pattern of lack often requires looking honestly at feelings toward the very people who passed that pattern down, and it is entirely natural, entirely human, to feel some quiet resentment toward a parent or grandparent whose fear or poor decisions shaped years of your own struggle. But Florence Scovel Shinn would gently insist that carrying this resentment forward does not punish them, it only continues binding you to the very pattern you are trying to leave. Think of resentment as a rope, and notice that a rope, by its very nature, connects two things. So long as you hold tightly to resentment toward the family pattern, you remain roped to it, tugged back toward it, however unconsciously. And this tug shows up in the smallest of places, in the way a person flinches at a bill even when they can easily afford it, in the way a person feels a flash of old anger when a parent offers financial advice, in the way a person overspends or underspends in some strange unconscious echo of exactly what they swore they would never repeat. This is why she taught a very specific kind of forgiveness work, not the kind that pretends nothing painful happened, not the kind that forces a false, brittle smile over real wounds, but the kind that says plainly, I see clearly what happened. I no longer require it to control my present. I release you, and I release myself. Consider a woman who carried quiet resentment toward her father for decisions made decades earlier, decisions that had genuinely cost the family financially and left a lasting mark on her own relationship with money. She had every reasonable justification for her resentment. No one would have argued the feeling was unfair. But she noticed something curious. Every time she sat down to do any kind of prosperity work, any affirmation, any planning, a low hum of old anger would rise up, almost automatically, and quietly undercut the whole effort. It was as though a part of her refused to let money flow freely as long as her father's failure remained unforgiven in her heart. So she began a very simple daily practice, speaking, at first through gritted teeth, and later with genuine ease. I forgive my father completely. I release him from my judgment. I release myself from carrying this resentment any further. And she found, somewhat to her surprise, that this forgiveness did not require excusing what had happened. It simply required no longer using it as fuel. And as the resentment loosened its grip, she noticed her own relationship with money loosening its grip too. Decisions that had once felt fearful began to feel calmer. Opportunities that had once felt suspicious began to feel welcome. And even her actual relationship with her father, strained for years, softened in ways she had not anticipated. Because forgiveness, once genuine, tends to heal far more than the single wound it was aimed at. Notice also how forgiveness sometimes needs to be extended not only backward to a parent, but sideways, to a sibling who seemed to inherit an easier portion, to a spouse's family who never seemed to struggle the way yours did. Comparison of this kind quietly breeds its own resentment, a resentment that says, why did they receive so easily what my family had to fight for, and this too must be released? Because comparison, like resentment toward a parent, keeps attention fixed on lack rather than on the abundant supply available equally to everyone willing to claim it. This is the spiritual plumbing Florence Scovel Shinn spoke of. Resentment clogs the pipe. Forgiveness clears it, not because the source of supply is petty and withholds good from angry people, but because an angry, gripped, resentful state is simply not a receptive state, and supply, like water, always flows toward openness and never toward a clenched fist. And it is worth adding here that forgiveness sometimes must be extended not only to a parent or grandparent, but to yourself, for every year you spent believing the old story, for every decision made from fear rather than faith. Self-forgiveness clears its own kind of blockage. So speak this too. I forgive myself for believing the old story so long. I release myself from that old identity completely. So if there is a parent, a grandparent, a family story you still feel a flicker of anger toward when you think of your own financial history, consider speaking this quietly today. I forgive completely. I release the old pattern and the people bound up in it. I bless them and I release myself. And notice, gently, how much lighter the whole subject of money begins to feel once that rope is finally set down. The seventh key is this: gratitude is the multiplier that turns a little supply into a great deal of supply. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that gratitude is not simply good manners toward the universe, it is an actual spiritual mechanism, a law as real and as consistent as any law of physics. Whatever is genuinely thanked for tends to increase, and whatever is complained about tends to contract. And this matters enormously for anyone raised in a household where money was discussed mostly through the language of complaint. Not enough this month. Always something extra to pay. Never quite enough left over. Because that language, however understandable, however grounded in real difficulty, trains a family's collective attention to focus entirely on lack. And attention is a kind of nourishment. Whatever receives your attention receives your energy and grows accordingly. So a household that speaks daily about what is missing is, without meaning to, feeding the very shortage it fears. Florence Scovel Shinn's answer to this was not to deny real difficulty or pretend a shortage does not exist, but to deliberately, consistently redirect attention toward whatever supply is already present, however small it appears, and to thank for it out loud, specifically, by name. Consider a man breaking a long family habit of financial complaint, who began a very small practice. Each evening, no matter how the day had gone, he would name 3 specific things related to money that had gone well, not vaguely, but specifically. Thank you that the electric bill was paid in full and on time. Thank you for the unexpected small refund that arrived today. Thank you for the meal that was affordable and satisfying. And at first, this felt almost trivial against the backdrop of larger worries. But he noticed something within weeks. His attention itself was shifting. He was beginning to notice small evidences of supply throughout each day that he had simply overlooked before, because he was now looking for them. And this shift in attention did something remarkable. It began attracting more of exactly what it noticed. This is what Florence Scovel Shinn meant when she taught that gratitude is a magnet, not merely a mood. Thanking specifically for what is already present opens a channel that vague complaint keeps firmly shut. And this is especially powerful medicine against a generational pattern. Because if a family has spent decades speaking the language of lack around every kitchen table, then a household that begins speaking specific, detailed gratitude around that same table is doing something genuinely new, planting a genuinely new seed in soil that has never grown this particular crop before. Imagine what it might mean for the next generation entirely. A child growing up, hearing not that money is scarce and frightening, but hearing, spoken plainly at dinner, "Thank you for this meal. Thank you for this roof. Thank you for the supply that met us again today." That child absorbs an entirely different picture than the one you may have absorbed. And this is how a pattern that ran for 3 generations can, in the very next generation, simply stop running. Notice, too, that gratitude works even in the middle of genuine difficulty. A woman facing a stack of bills she does not yet know how she will cover can still, honestly, thank for the roof currently over her head, thank for the meal currently on her table, thank for the ideas already quietly forming toward a solution. This is not denial of the difficulty. It is simply refusing to let the difficulty be the only thing spoken over the situation. Because Florence Scovel Shinn taught that even in the middle of a shortage, there is always some supply present to be thanked for. And thanking for that present supply, however modest, is what opens the door for greater supply to follow. So consider building this into your own evenings. No matter how small the day's supply seemed, name it specifically and thank for it out loud. Thank you for this exact provision. Thank you for this door that opened. Thank you for this bill that was paid. And watch, patiently, faithfully, as the specific thanks become specific increase. Because Florence Scovel Shinn was certain of this law, gratitude is the surest way to more. The 8th key is this: struggle is not what brings supply, non-resistance is, and this may be the single hardest teaching for anyone raised in a family where struggle was worn almost like a badge of honor, where hard work was treated as the only respectable path to anything, and where ease, whenever it appeared, was met with suspicion rather than welcome. Florence Scovel Shinn taught something quite countercultural here. She taught that supply flows most freely, not through clenched effort, but through a relaxed, trusting, non-resistant state. She pointed again and again to the natural world for evidence of this. A river does not strain to reach the sea. It simply flows along the path of least resistance and arrives exactly where it is meant to arrive. A seed does not force itself into a plant through anxious effort. It simply rests in fertile soil and unfolds according to its nature. This does not mean action is unnecessary. Florence Scovel Shinn was never a teacher of passivity. She was clear that right ideas must be acted upon promptly, but she distinguished sharply between inspired action, which flows easily, and often even joyfully from a right idea, and effortful struggle, which comes from fear and from the belief that supply must be forced or wrestled into existence against resistance. Consider a family in which every single member, for as long as anyone could remember, believed that money only came through exhausting struggle, long hours, clenched jaws, constant worry, even in the midst of relative sufficiency. And one member of that family began to notice something uncomfortable. Even when supply did arrive, it never felt like relief. It felt like the beginning of the next worry, because the family pattern was not simply a shortage of money. It was a permanent inner state of resistance that no amount of money ever actually satisfied. And this is a subtle but crucial point, because sometimes the pattern is not a literal absence of money at all. Sometimes there is money, and still there is dread, still there is grasping, still there is a bracing for the next disaster. And this too is a form of the same generational lack, only wearing a different coat, so she began, very deliberately, practicing what Florence Scovel Shinn called letting go, and letting the source of supply work through her, rather than against imagined resistance. This looked, in practice, like catching herself mid-clench, mid-worry, and consciously softening, breathing, saying quietly, "I release this into the hands of infinite supply. I do my part with ease and I trust the outcome." And at first this felt almost irresponsible, as though relaxing even slightly might cause everything to collapse. But she found, again and again, that the opposite was true. Solutions arrived more easily when she was not gripping so tightly. Opportunities appeared in relaxed conversations rather than anxious ones, and slowly her whole relationship to earning and receiving softened from a clenched fist into an open hand, and she began to notice, almost with astonishment, that the moments of greatest ease in her life were also, without exception, the moments of greatest increase. Consider also how this shows up physically, in the body itself: a tight jaw over a bill, a shallow breath before opening a banking app, shoulders climbing toward the ears at the mention of a financial conversation. These are the body's own signals of resistance, and Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the body often knows before the mind admits it. So learning to notice these small physical signals and immediately softening them, unclenching the jaw, lengthening the breath, dropping the shoulders, becomes its own quiet spiritual practice, a way of teaching the whole self, body included, that ease rather than resistance is now the normal state around money. This is worth sitting with honestly, because a family pattern of struggle so often disguises itself as simple diligence, as admirable work ethic, and there is nothing wrong with genuine effort applied to a right idea, but there is a real difference between effort that flows from trust and effort that flows from fear, and only you can feel, honestly, which one is actually running underneath your own daily striving. Ask yourself, does my work feel like an expression of faith, or does it feel like an attempt to outrun a disaster I am secretly certain is coming? The answer will tell you everything. So this week, Notice the moments your jaw tightens around money, your shoulders rise, your breath shortens, and in that exact moment, practice softening, practice speaking. I release resistance, supply flows to me with ease, and let your open hand, rather than your clenched fist, become the new posture your whole family finally learns from you. The ninth key is this, and it is the key that gathers up every key before it. You must finally accept your new name. Florence Scovel Shinn loved the passage in the Book of Revelation that speaks of a white stone given to the one who overcomes, a stone with a new name written on it, known only to the one who receives it, and she taught that this new name is nothing less than your true identity in the true source, the identity that was always yours beneath every inherited fear, beneath every family story, beneath every worn path your mind once walked automatically. And she taught that claiming this new name is the final, decisive act that seals every other key into place, because you can deny the old belief, you can plant new seeds daily, you can forgive your family completely, you can practice gratitude and non-resistance faithfully. And still, if you continue quietly answering to the old name underneath it all, the old identity of the struggling one, the anxious one, the one lack always seems to find, the work remains unfinished. So what does it actually mean to accept a new name? It means speaking, plainly and repeatedly, who you actually are now. Not who your family history suggested you might be, but who the true source has always known you to be. It means saying, I am no longer the one poverty visits, I am the one supply seeks out. I am no longer carrying my family's old story. I am the one who ends it and begins an entirely new one. And speaking this, not as a hopeful wish, but as a settled fact. Because Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the spoken word carries the full authority of whatever state it is spoken from. Spoken from doubt, it produces little. Spoken from calm, settled conviction, it produces a great deal. And she taught further that this new name must be worn the way a person wears a name they have always known was theirs, not tentatively, not apologetically, but simply and naturally, the way you answer without hesitation when someone calls the name you were given at birth. So too must you learn to answer, without hesitation, to this truer name, the one supply belongs to. Consider what it actually looks like to practice this in daily life. When a friend asks how are things going financially, the old name would answer through a sigh. Oh, you know, always something. But the new name answers plainly. Things are good. Supply always meets me. And this is not boasting. It is simply reporting truth from a settled identity, rather than performing worry out of old habit. When an unexpected expense arrives, the old name would spiral immediately into, of course, this would happen to me. But the new name pauses and says calmly, this does not shake me. I am provided for, and looks for the right idea, rather than rehearsing the old panic. Small moments like these, repeated daily, are where a new name is actually built and proven, not in one dramatic ceremony, but in 1,000 small, quiet choices to answer to the truer identity rather than the inherited one. Think back to where we began, the woman with the decree, watching envelopes stack up on a kitchen counter, absorbing a picture of scarcity long before she understood what a picture even was. And remember that the turning point for her was never a single dramatic financial windfall. It was a quiet, private moment of accepting a new name, no longer the daughter of lack, but the daughter of abundant supply. And once she began speaking from that new name consistently, every other key we have walked through together found its footing more easily. Forgiveness came more naturally once she no longer needed her family's old failures to explain her own identity. Gratitude flowed more easily once she was no longer scanning her life for evidence of the old name. Non-resistance became possible once she was no longer bracing for the old story to repeat itself. The right ideas arrived more readily once her mind was no longer clouded by the old anxious identity straining to be heard over them. This is why Florence Scovel Shinn placed such enormous weight on this quiet, private act of self-naming, because a new name, spoken with conviction, is not a decoration on top of the work. It is the very seal that holds all the other work together. Without it, the other keys remain scattered tools. With it, they become a single, unified decree. So I want you, right now, wherever you are, to speak your new name plainly, not your old name, not the name your family history whispered over you, but the true name that has been waiting patiently underneath it this whole time. I am the one prosperity was always meant to find. Say it again if you need to. Let it settle. Feel the weight of it the way you might feel the weight of a ring slipped onto a finger for the first time. Official now, true now, yours now, because this is the decree that ends 3 generations, not through struggle, not through force, but through one person finally, quietly, decisively, accepting who they actually are. Here is the whole picture, gathered together simply. Poverty as a family pattern is never a fact about you. It is only an old, unchallenged belief that continues only as long as someone keeps signing their name to it. You break the chain first by refusing to defend the old story, then by denying its power and speaking the true replacement in its place, then by faithfully planting new thoughts in the fertile, unopinionated soil of your own mind. Then by reshaping the very self-concept that decides what you are able to hold. Then by becoming quiet enough to receive the right idea, rather than straining to force one. Then by forgiving completely the family and the pattern that once bound you. Then by multiplying whatever supply is already present through specific, spoken gratitude. Then by softening your grip and trusting non-resistant ease over anxious struggle, and finally by accepting, plainly and repeatedly, the new name that was always truly yours. This is the whole ladder, and you do not need to climb it perfectly, you only need to keep climbing it faithfully. If what you have heard today has stirred something real in you, something that says, I am ready to be the one my family finally needed, I want to invite you gently into something we have built for exactly this moment. It is called the Overflow Covenant, and it is a small, devoted community walking these very principles together, week by week, with guided practices drawn directly from this kind of teaching, daily words to speak, daily seeds to plant, a place where you are not doing this quiet, decisive work of ending an old story alone, but alongside others who are also choosing, deliberately, to become the new name in their own family line. If that calls to you, look below this video for how to join us there, and know that whether you join us or simply carry these 9 keys forward on your own, the decree has already been spoken here today, and a decree spoken in faith does not return empty. So let us close together the way we began, with the words that carry the wand's true power. I am the one in whom the old story stops. Supply flows to me now and through me now. My word is my wand. Poverty ran in that family for 3 generations, and it ended, quietly, completely, the moment one woman decided her word was stronger than her history. Let yours end the same way today. If you wake up at 3 a.m., God is ready to talk about your money. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the quiet hours of the night are when divine guidance can reach you most clearly, and when your supply is quietly worked out while the world sleeps. So here is the premise. In the book of Job, chapter 33, verses 15 and 16, it says, In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men, in slumberings upon the bed, then he openeth the ears of men, and sealeth their instruction. Think about what that means. That in the stillness of the night, when all the noise of the day has finally fallen silent, God opens your ears, and Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the quiet hour, when the busy reasoning mind is at last still, is exactly when guidance can reach you, and your supply can be impressed upon the deep mind. So if you find yourself awake at 3 in the morning, it may not be a curse at all. It may be an appointment. And here is what you can say the moment you wake. God speaks to me in the night. My supply is being arranged while I rest. My word is my wand. Say it with me now. God speaks to me in the night. My supply is being arranged while I rest. My word is my wand. Again, God speaks to me in the night. My supply is being arranged while I rest. My word is my wand. Feel that. You are no longer lying awake in fear. You are lying awake in the presence of a God who is arranging your good. And if you believe God is arranging your supply tonight, type it in the comments right now. Amen. Just type Amen. And stay with me, because I am going to show you exactly why you wake at that hour and how to use it so that God can guide your money. Now let me give you the first key, which is that 3 in the morning is not random. It is the quiet hour. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the divine can reach us most easily in stillness, and there is no stillness in all the day like the stillness of the deep night. In the daytime, your mind is a crowded, noisy room, 1,000 voices, 1,000 worries, 1,000 tasks, all shouting at once, and in that noise the quiet voice of guidance cannot be heard. But at 3 in the morning, the world has gone silent, the phone is dark, the tasks have stopped, the noise has died away, and into that rare silence, something can finally be heard that was drowned out all day long. This is why so many people wake at that hour, with a sense that something is trying to reach them, because something is. The very quiet that feels so lonely and so empty is actually the clearing of the room, so that a single voice can speak. So the first thing to understand is that the hour itself is a gift. The silence is not your enemy. It is the condition under which you can finally hear. 3 in the morning is the hour the world is quiet enough for God to get a word in, and there is a reason the wisest souls in every tradition have risen in the night to seek God. The mystics, the saints, the praying men and women of every age have known a secret that the noisy modern world has forgotten, that the deep of the night holds a quality of communion available at no other hour. The psalmist wrote that he rose at midnight to give thanks, and again that his soul waited for God more than they that watch for the morning. These were not people cursed with insomnia. These were people who understood that the still night hour is a doorway, and who went through it deliberately. So if you find yourself awake when all the world sleeps, you are in ancient and holy company. You are awake at the very hour that the seekers of every age sought out on purpose. And what feels to you like an affliction, this waking in the dark, they would have recognized as an invitation into the deepest communion available to a human soul. The second key is that your anxiety at that hour is a misread signal. You wake feeling fear about money, and you assume the fear is the message, but the fear is not the message. The waking is the message. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we so often fill the silence with the voice of our own fear instead of listening for the voice of guidance. Think about what actually happens. You wake at 3, and instantly the old anxious mind rushes in to fill the silence. It starts running the numbers, rehearsing the bills, replaying the lack, and you lie there in a spiral of worry, and you conclude that you woke because something is wrong. But you have misread the whole thing. You did not wake because something is wrong. You woke because the door was open, and in the silence you had a choice of which voice to let speak. And out of old habit you let fear grab the microphone. but the waking itself was an invitation to listen for something far better. So the fear you feel at 3 in the morning is not a message that your money is doomed. It is simply the wrong voice, rushing into a silence that was meant for a different voice entirely. And once you understand that, you can gently set the fear down and turn instead to listen for the voice that the silence was actually opened for. And I want to speak directly to the person who dreads that waking, the one for whom 3 in the morning has become a place of torment, because I know how real that fear is. You have come to dread going to sleep at all, because you know that at some point in the small hours you will jolt awake and the fears will be waiting for you. The bills, the debt, the not enough. And they seem so much larger and more hopeless in the dark than they ever do in the day. And you lie there feeling utterly alone with them, and you have come to believe that this hour is your enemy. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught that our experience is shaped by the meaning we assign to it, and I am asking you to consider that you have assigned the wrong meaning to this waking entirely. The fears feel larger in the dark, not because they are larger, but because you are more open, more receptive, more sensitive in that hour. And that same openness that lets the fear in so sharply is the very openness that could let God in even more sharply, if you would turn toward Him instead of toward the fear. The hour is not your enemy. The hour is neutral. It is simply a doorway, and you have been walking through it into fear when you could be walking through it into peace. So if 3 in the morning has been a place of dread for you, I want to offer you this, that the very thing you have dreaded could become the thing you look forward to, that the hour of your deepest fear could become the hour of your deepest peace and your clearest guidance, if only you will change what you do when you arrive there, and that change is entirely within your power. The third key is that at that hour the critical mind is asleep, and so the door to the deep mind stands wide open, and this is the real mechanism behind everything. Florence Scovel Shinn taught, along with the deepest students of the mind, that during the day, the reasoning, doubting, critical part of your mind stands guard, and it argues with everything. You try to affirm your good, and it instantly snaps back with all the reasons it cannot be. But in the drowsy hours of the night, that critical guard grows sleepy and lowers its weapons. The arguing mind goes quiet, and the deep mind, the subconscious that actually shapes your circumstances, lies open and receptive. And this is why whatever you think and feel in those night hours sinks so much deeper than anything you think. In the bright, noisy day, in the day your good impressions are challenged and cancelled, almost as fast as you make them. But at 3 in the morning, there is no guard at the door. So whatever you carry into that silence goes straight down into the deep mind and takes root. And this cuts both ways. If you lie there and marinate in fear and lack, you are impressing that fear deep into the mind that builds your world. But if instead you fill that open silence with the feeling of your supply, with a quiet declaration of abundance, with a listening trust, then that goes just as deep and takes root just as powerfully. So the night hour is not neutral. It is the most fertile and receptive hour you have. And what you plant in it, whether fear or faith, grows with tremendous force, which is exactly why you must not waste it on worry. And let me help you feel just how powerful this open door really is, because once you grasp it, you will never look at a sleepless night the same way again. Imagine trying to write a message on the surface of a pond in the middle of the day. The water is churning, the wind is blowing, boats are crossing, and the moment you trace a word, it is gone, swallowed by the chop. That is your mind in the daytime. Every good thought you try to impress is instantly disturbed and erased by the churning of doubt and busyness and noise. But now imagine that same pond at 3 in the morning, perfectly still, like glass, And now a single word traced upon it holds. It stays. It sinks in. That stillness is the deep mind at that hour. And whatever you trace upon it in that stillness sinks down and remains. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the subconscious accepts most readily what is impressed upon it in a state of relaxed receptivity, and there is no more relaxed and receptive state in your whole day than the drowsy quiet of the night. So understand what you are being handed. You are being handed the 1 hour when the pond is like glass, when your word actually holds. And this is why it is such a tragedy to spend that hour tracing words of fear upon the still water, because those hold too, they sink just as deep. So you must be vigilant about what you allow yourself to dwell upon in that hour. You guard that still water, and you trace upon it only what you wish to see grow, only supply, only trust, only the quiet knowing that you are provided for. Because whatever you write on the glass of the deep mind at that hour, you will meet again in your outer world. The fourth key is what to actually do the moment you wake. Because the hour is precious, and most people squander it completely. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the first response to any moment determines what follows, and the almost universal mistake at 3 in the morning is to do one of two things: either to grab the phone and drown the sacred silence in noise and light and distraction, or to lie there and let the anxious mind run wild through the numbers and the fears. And both of these waste the appointment entirely. So here is what to do instead. The moment you become aware that you are awake in the night, do not reach for the phone. Do not start running the numbers. Instead, get still, lie quietly, and turn the waking into a listening post. Take a slow breath, relax your body, and gently say, "Here I am listening. Speak, Lord," and then simply be still and receptive. You are not trying to force anything. You are not straining. You are simply making yourself quiet and available. You are treating the waking as what it truly is, an appointment with a God who wants to guide you. And in that stillness, you either receive a sense of guidance, a knowing, a peace, a quiet direction, or you simply rest in the presence and let your supply be worked upon in the deep. Either way, the hour is used well instead of wasted. So you train yourself, when you wake in the night, to get still and listen rather than to grab and worry. And that single change transforms 3 in the morning from your worst hour into your most sacred one. And let me speak plainly about the phone, because it is the single greatest thief of this sacred hour in the modern world. You wake at 3 in the morning, and almost without thinking, your hand reaches for the glowing screen. And in an instant, the sacred silence is shattered. The light floods your eyes. The noise floods your mind. The endless scroll pulls you into other people's lives, and other people's opinions, and 100 new anxieties. And the open door, the appointment, the still water, all of it is gone, wasted, drowned. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we must guard our minds and not fill them with what disturbs our peace. And there is nothing that disturbs the peace of the night more completely than that little glowing rectangle. So make this a firm rule for yourself. When you wake in the night, you do not reach for the phone. Leave it across the room if you must. Leave it face down and untouched, because the phone offers you noise when the hour is offering you a voice. It offers you distraction when the hour is offering you direction. It offers you everyone else's fear when the hour is offering you God's peace. So you refuse the phone, you leave it dark, and you keep the silence intact, because that silence is the whole gift. And the moment you break it with the screen, you have traded a conversation with God for a scroll through the anxieties of strangers. And that is the worst trade you could ever make, at the best hour you will ever have. And let me give you a simple sequence to follow, so that when you wake, You are not fumbling but have a clear path. First, the moment you realize you are awake, do not move toward the phone, and do not let the mind bolt toward the fear. Just breathe, one slow, deep breath, and let your body relax back into the bed. Second, quietly acknowledge where you are. Say inwardly, "This is the quiet hour. This is my appointment. I am here, and I am listening." Third, get still and simply rest in that stillness for a moment. Not doing, not straining, just being quiet and open. Fourth, if there is a specific matter on your heart, bring it gently into that stillness as a question laid before God, and then listen. Fifth, whether or not a clear answer comes, speak your supply, plant your affirmation in the still ground. Sixth, release your fear, hand the whole matter over. And seventh, let yourself drift back towards sleep, wrapped in that trust. And if you wake again, you simply begin the sequence again. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that what we practice faithfully becomes our nature. So the first few nights this may feel unfamiliar and effortful. The old habit of grabbing the phone or spiraling into fear will be strong. But each night you follow this sequence instead, it becomes a little more natural, until one night you realize that waking in the dark no longer fills you with dread, but with a quiet sense of coming home to your appointment. And the sequence unfolds almost on its own. The fifth key is to actually ask God your money question and then listen for the answer. Because the night is the time to receive guidance, not just to rest. Florence Scovel Shinn taught the reality of intuition, the still small voice within, the definite leading that guides us when we learn to listen. She taught that we can ask for guidance about a specific situation and receive a clear inner knowing about what to do. And the quiet of the night is the ideal time for this. So when you wake and grow still, you can bring your actual money question into that silence. Not as a worry, but as a question laid before God. You might silently ask, "What would you have me do about this?" Or "Show me the way." Or "What is my next step?" And then, and this is the key, you stop talking and you listen. You become quiet and receptive and you wait, not straining, just open, and often, in that stillness, an answer comes, not usually as a booming voice, but as a quiet knowing, a sense of the right next step, a name that comes to mind, an idea that surfaces, a feeling of peace pointing one direction. Or sometimes the answer does not come right then, but arrives later in the day, having been asked for in the night. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the guidance is always available when we truly ask and truly listen. So use the night hour to ask. Lay your money question before God in the silence, and then listen, receptively, for the leading that comes. And let me help you understand how this guidance actually sounds. Because most people are waiting for something dramatic, and so they miss the real thing entirely. They are waiting for a booming voice, a vision, a bolt of lightning, and because that never comes, they conclude God did not answer. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught that divine guidance almost always comes softly, as a still small voice, as a quiet knowing, as a gentle persistent nudge. So when you ask your money question in the night, and then listen, do not listen for thunder, listen for the quiet. The answer may come as a single name floating up in your mind, a person you had not thought of, or as a sudden simple idea, so obvious once it appears that you wonder why you did not see it before, or as a quiet sense of peace settling over one particular option and not the others, or as a persistent gentle pull in a certain direction. And here is how you tell true guidance from mere anxious thinking. True guidance carries peace with it. It feels quiet and settled and sure, even if it asks something of you. While anxious thinking carries agitation, it spins and frets and drives you in circles. So when a thought comes in the night wrapped in peace, when it is quiet and clear and it stays, pay attention. That is very often the leading you asked for, and you receive it with gratitude, and you make a quiet note to act on it, and you do not argue it away just because it seems too simple or too small. For Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the guidance is often a single small step, not the whole plan, just the next step. And your part is only to take that next step when it is shown, and trust that once you do, the step after it will be shown in its turn. And let me give you some actual questions to bring into that silence, because people often do not know what to ask, and a vague asking receives a vague answer. So bring a real, specific question. You might ask, "What is my next step regarding this situation?" Or, "Show me the way through this." Or, "What am I not seeing here?" Or, "Who should I speak to about this?" Or simply, "Guide me in this matter." And having asked, you release the question and you listen. And here is something important. You do not demand an immediate answer, and you do not strain to produce one. Straining only fills the silence with your own anxious noise again. Instead, you ask, and then you rest in trust, knowing that the answer will come, whether in that moment as a quiet knowing, or later in the day as a sudden idea, or an unexpected opening, or a leading you feel drawn to follow. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that when we truly turn a matter over and ask for guidance in faith, the answer always comes, though not always on our timetable, and not always in the form we expected. So you ask in the night, clearly and specifically, and then you let go and you watch, receptively, in the hours and days that follow, for the answer that you know is on its way, and when it comes, in whatever form it comes, you recognize it as the response to what you asked in the sacred stillness, and you act on it. The sixth key is to speak your supply into the silence, to plant your affirmation in the most fertile hour there is, because the night is not only for listening, it is also for declaring. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the spoken word has power, and that word planted in the receptive deep mind takes root, and there is no more receptive moment than the quiet of the night when the critical guard is down. So in that stillness, after you have listened, you also declare, you speak your supply, quietly, with feeling, God is my supply, and it reaches me now. My needs are met in abundance. I am divinely provided for. Or the affirmation we began with, God speaks to me in the night. My supply is being arranged while I rest. And because you are speaking it in that open, unguarded hour, it sinks far deeper than the same words spoken in the busy day. You are planting your good in the richest soil at the most fertile hour. So you do not only listen in the night, you also plant. You speak your supply into the silence and let it sink down into the deep mind that builds your world. And then you rest in the feeling of it, letting that declaration be the last thing in your mind. And let me give you the words to plant, because in the vulnerable openness of the night, it helps to have your declaration ready rather than fumbling for it. So prepare your affirmation in advance. Know it by heart, so that when you wake, you can simply begin to speak it, and speak it in the present tense, as something already true. Not, I hope to be provided for, but I am provided for. Not money will come to me, but my supply reaches me now, and claim your identity in it. I am the child of a God who owns everything. I am divinely and lavishly provided for. And speak it slowly, with feeling, letting each phrase sink into the still water before you speak the next. You are not rushing through words. You are planting seeds, one by one, into open ground, and you repeat it gently, not with strain, not with desperation, for desperation is the voice of lack, and it would only plant lack, but with a quiet, settled certainty, as though you were simply stating a fact, that has always been true, and Florence Scovel Shinn taught that it is the feeling behind the word that impresses the subconscious. So you must feel the truth of your supply as you speak it. Feel the security of it, the relief of it, the quiet gratitude of it, and let that feeling carry the words down into the deep. And then, having spoken and felt your supply, you rest in it. You let the declaration be the atmosphere you drift in. You do not speak it once and then return to worry. You let it become the very air of that night hour, so that whether you fall back to sleep or lie awake a while longer, you are wrapped the whole time in the felt reality of your supply. And there is a beautiful reason the night is such fertile ground for your spoken word, and it is worth understanding. In the day, the instant you declare your supply, the reasoning mind pounces. But how? It demands. From where? You have no money. This is not true. And that objection cancels your declaration almost before it is finished. So your good word never gets a chance to sink in. It is challenged and erased on the surface, but at 3 in the morning, the objecting mind is drowsy and slow and largely silent. It has gone off duty, and so your declaration meets no resistance. It is not challenged, it is not cancelled, it simply flows down, unopposed, into the deep mind and takes root. This is why the same affirmation that feels hollow and unconvincing in the harried daylight can feel quietly, deeply true in the stillness of the night. It is not that the words changed. It is that in the night there is no guard at the gate to turn them away. So the night gives your good word a clear, unobstructed path straight into the mind that shapes your world. And this is a gift you should not waste, for it means the affirmations that struggle to take hold during your busy day can be planted in the night when they will actually take. So bring your supply declaration into that unguarded hour and let it flow down into ground where nothing will dig it up, nothing will argue it away, nothing will cancel it, and there, in that receptive dark, it will quietly take root and begin to grow toward the light of your outer world. The 7th key is to recognize and follow the guidance that comes, because guidance received but not acted upon is wasted. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that when we receive a definite leading, an intuitive hunch, a clear inner nudge, we must have the courage to follow it, even when it does not seem to make full sense to the reasoning mind. So when you have asked in the night, and a leading comes, whether right then or later, you must learn to recognize it and to act on it. The guidance often comes quietly, a persistent thought to reach out to a certain person, a nudge to look into a certain opportunity, an idea that keeps returning, a sense that you should take a particular step, and the reasoning mind will often argue with it, will call it foolish or unnecessary or too small to matter. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught that these leadings are the voice of divine intelligence guiding you toward your supply, and that those who follow them are led to their good by paths they could never have planned. So you learn to trust the quiet leadings, to act on the hunch, to take the step even when you cannot see the whole staircase, because the guidance you receive in the night is not meant to be admired, it is meant to be followed. And it is in the following that the supply actually comes. And let me address the fear that keeps most people from ever following their guidance, because it is real and it must be faced. When a leading comes, especially one that asks you to do something, to reach out to someone, to take a risk, to make a change, the reasoning mind immediately floods you with objections. What if it does not work? What if you look foolish? What if it makes things worse? And that flood of fear talks most people out of the very step that would have led them to their supply. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught that faith is not the absence of that fear. It is the willingness to take the step in spite of it. She taught that we walk up to the very thing we are afraid of, and it dissolves. that the blessing is often on the other side of the exact step we are most afraid to take. So when the guidance comes and the fear rises to argue against it, you must learn to recognize that this fear is not wisdom. It is the very thing standing between you and your good, and you take the step anyway, not recklessly, not foolishly, but with a quiet trust that the guidance that came in the sacred stillness of the night is more to be trusted than the fear that rises in the anxious light of day. And here is what happens when you begin to follow your leadings faithfully. You build a relationship of trust with your own guidance. Each time you follow a leading, and it proves right, your faith grows. You learn that the quiet voice can be trusted, and you become more willing to follow the next leading, and the next. And as you do, your whole life begins to be guided, step by step, toward your good, along a path you could never have planned with your reasoning mind alone. So do not let the fear rob you of your guidance. When the leading comes, follow it, take the step, and watch how the way opens before you as you walk. And let me make one thing clear about following guidance, so that you do not misunderstand and fall into passivity. Letting God arrange your supply and following your guidance are not opposites. They work together. You release the matter and trust God to arrange it. And part of how God arranges it is by giving you leadings to follow. So the arranging is not always something that happens entirely without you. Often the way your good comes is that you are guided to take a step, and then another. And the taking of those steps is your part in the arrangement. So releasing the outcome does not mean doing nothing. It means doing only what you are guided to do when you are guided to do it, and leaving the rest to God. This is the balance. You are not frantically striving, trying to force your supply through your own effort. And you are not passively waiting, doing nothing at all. You are resting in trust, listening for guidance, and faithfully taking the steps you are shown. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we are to be led, that the divine plan of our life includes the very steps we are to take, and that our part is to follow the leading one step at a time. So you hold both of these together, the deep rest of trusting God to arrange it, and the active faith of following the guidance that comes. And between them, your good is worked out, partly in the unseen by a power greater than you, and partly through your own guided steps. And you never have to figure out which is which. You simply rest, listen, and follow. The eighth key is to hand your fear back to God before you return to sleep, because how you fall back asleep matters enormously. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we must cast our burden and rest in the assurance of divine care. And the scripture says, "He giveth his beloved sleep." So when you have listened and declared in the night, you do not then pick your fear back up and carry it into sleep. Instead, you deliberately release it. You hand it over. You say, "I release this to you. I trust you to work it out while I rest." And you let the worry go. Because to fall asleep, still clutching the fear, is to impress that fear into the deep mind through the whole night. But to fall asleep, having released it, resting in trust, is to hand the whole matter over to God to be worked out while you sleep. So you make it a practice, before you drift back off, to consciously set the burden down, to release the money fear into God's hands, and to let yourself sink into sleep, wrapped not in worry but in trust. And this releasing is itself a profound act of faith. It is you declaring that the matter is safe in hands far greater than your own. And let me show you what a difference this makes. Because the way you fall asleep sets the tone for the entire night's work. Imagine two people who both wake at 3 in the morning with the same money fear. The first person lies there clutching the fear, turning it over and over, and finally falls into a restless, shallow sleep, still gripping it. And all night long that fear is being impressed into the deep mind. The mind spends the whole night marinating in lack, and the person wakes exhausted and more afraid than before. The second person wakes with the same fear, but they listen, they declare their supply, and then, deliberately, they set the fear down. They say, "I have done my part. I have listened and I have spoken. Now I release this to you. I trust you to work it out while I sleep." And they let it go, and they sink into sleep, wrapped in trust instead of fear, and all night long it is that trust, that assurance of divine care, that is being impressed into the deep mind. And the whole night the deep mind is working on their behalf instead of against them, and they wake rested, and often with a sense of peace, or even an idea that was not there the night before. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that we must cast the whole weight of our care upon the divine, and rest, truly rest, in the assurance that we are being cared for. And the scripture promises he giveth his beloved sleep, not restless clutching worry, but sleep, real sleep, the sleep of one who has handed the matter over to hands greater than their own. So this releasing before sleep is not a small thing. It is the difference between a night that deepens your fear and a night that arranges your good. And it is entirely your choice which one you have, so choose to release. Every time, choose to hand it over and sink into trust. And let me warn you about the trap that catches so many people right here. They hear that the night is receptive, and they grow afraid of it. They think, if whatever I dwell on at night sinks so deep, then I must be terrified of waking with a fearful thought. And that very fear of the fear makes them tense and anxious about the night. But this is not the response Florence Scovel Shinn would have you take. The point is not to fear the open door. The point is to use it well. Yes, the night is receptive, and yes, that means fear planted there takes root. But it also means faith planted there takes root just as powerfully. So you do not respond by dreading the receptivity. You respond by governing what you plant. You become the gardener of that fertile ground, rather than its victim. And a gardener does not fear his rich soil because weeds could grow in it. He simply plants what he wants and tends it. So you do the same. You do not lie there terrified that a fearful thought might slip in. You gently, deliberately, plant the good. And if a fearful thought does arise, you do not panic, and you do not fight it. You simply turn, calmly, back to your supply, back to your trust, back to the good you are choosing to plant. And in this way, the receptivity of the night becomes entirely your friend, because you have taken charge of what grows there. The ninth key is to let God arrange your supply while you sleep. And this is the deepest truth of the whole teaching, that the work is happening in the night while you rest. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that when we release a matter in faith, the divine intelligence goes to work arranging its fulfillment, and that much of the real work happens not through our frantic daytime effort, but through the quiet operation of the deep mind and the divine. So as you sleep, having listened and declared and released, your supply is being arranged. The deep mind is working. Connections are being made. The bridge to your good is being built in ways you cannot see. And you wake, not to resume your worry, but to expect your guidance and your good. You wake believing that while you slept, the matter was being handled, and this changes the entire character of the night. The 3 in the morning waking is no longer a torment. It is a sacred appointment where you listen, declare, and release. And the sleep that follows is no longer restless worry. It is the time when God arranges what you have entrusted to Him. So you rest in this, that your supply does not depend on your anxious striving. It is being worked out in the quiet, while you sleep, by a power that never sleeps. And let me help you truly rest in this, because it is the most freeing truth in the whole teaching. Most people believe that their supply depends entirely on their own frantic effort. that if they are not personally pushing and striving and worrying every waking moment, then nothing is being done and everything will fall apart, and so they can never truly rest. Even their sleep is anxious, because deep down they believe the whole weight of their provision rests on their own two shoulders. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught something that lifts that crushing weight off you. She taught that there is a divine intelligence that is actually the source of your supply, and that this intelligence works on your behalf, arranging, connecting, opening doors, building the bridge to your good, and that much of this work happens quietly, beneath the surface, without your conscious effort at all. And this means that your sleep, far from being wasted time, can be the most productive time of all. Because while you sleep, released and trusting, the deep mind and the divine intelligence are at work on the very matter you handed over. Think of how often a solution appears in the morning that was nowhere to be found the night before. How often people say they slept on a problem and woke with the answer. This is not an accident. It is the deep mind, working through the night, while the conscious mind rested. So when you release your money matter before sleep and hand it over, you are not abandoning it. You are delegating it to a power far more capable than your anxious daytime mind. And you wake not to a matter that sat untouched all night, but to a matter that was worked upon all night by an intelligence that never sleeps. So you can truly rest. You can let go of the belief that your worry is holding everything together, because your worry was never holding anything together. It was only exhausting you. The real work is done in trust, in release, in the quiet operation of a power greater than yourself. And when you learn to sleep in that trust, you wake to find that the night was working for you all along, and there is a deep peace that comes from truly grasping this, a peace that can change not only your nights, but the entire way you carry your money through your days. Because once you know, really know, that your supply is being arranged by a power that works even while you sleep, the frantic, exhausting sense that it all depends on you begins to dissolve. You no longer have to hold the whole weight of your provision in your own trembling hands every waking moment. You can set it down, you can rest, you can trust. And this does not make you passive or careless, it makes you peaceful and effective. Because action taken from that place of trust and rest is far clearer and wiser than action driven by panic and exhaustion. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the peaceful, trusting state is the state in which our good can most easily reach us, while the anxious, striving state actually blocks it. So learning to rest in the knowledge that God arranges your supply while you sleep is not only a comfort for your nights, it is a key to your whole prosperity, for it moves you out of the blocked state of fear and into the open state of trust. And from that open state, your good flows more freely than it ever could when you were gripping and forcing and straining. So let this truth sink all the way down. Your supply does not rest on your shoulders alone. It rests in the hands of a God who works while you sleep. And your part is simply to listen, to trust, to follow, and to rest. Here is the whole picture. If you wake at 3 in the morning, it is not a curse but an appointment, because that quiet hour is when the noise dies and God can finally be heard. Your anxiety at that hour is a misread signal. The waking is the invitation, and the critical mind is asleep, so the door to the deep mind stands open. So the moment you wake, you get still and listen, rather than grabbing the phone or spiraling in worry. You ask God your money question and listen for the answer. You speak your supply into the fertile silence. You recognize and follow the guidance that comes. You hand your fear back to God before you sleep, and you let your supply be arranged while you rest. This is how 3 in the morning becomes the hour God talks to you about your money. Every part of it is available to you starting tonight. And before we close, Let me be direct with you for a moment, because knowing what to do at 3 in the morning is one thing, but actually building the habit, night after night, of listening instead of worrying, declaring instead of fearing, releasing instead of clutching, that takes practice and repetition, and most people cannot build it alone. The old habit of waking into fear has years of momentum, and it returns the moment you are tired and vulnerable in the dark. This is exactly why I created the Overflow Covenant, a 21-day sequence where one short decree, built for exactly this kind of quiet planting, lands in your inbox every single morning, to train you day after day to meet the night with faith instead of fear, until listening for God in the stillness becomes your natural response, and the fear of lack loses its grip on your nights for good. It is $27, one payment, 30-day full refund. The link is right there in the description. Begin it tonight, and let the first decree reach you in the morning. And let me remind you why this matters so deeply. Because it can transform not just your money, but your entire experience of your nights. Think of how many hours of your life have been stolen by 3 in the morning. How many nights you have lain there in the dark, alone and afraid, watching the ceiling, running the numbers, feeling utterly powerless. And think of what it would mean to reclaim those hours, to have the very hour that has tormented you become the hour that guides and provides for you. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that there is no situation so dark that the divine cannot turn it to good. And here is a perfect example. The darkest, loneliest, most fearful hour of your night transformed into a sacred appointment with a God who is arranging your supply. This is the turning of your worst hour into your best, and it is not a fantasy, it is a real and available shift, and it costs you nothing but a change in what you do when you wake. So speak the affirmation with me one final time before you go. God speaks to me in the night. My supply is being arranged while I rest. My word is my wand. Hold that, and the next time you wake at 3 in the morning, do not reach for your phone and do not reach for your fear. Get still and listen, because God is ready to talk about your. God wants you wealthy, and there is one verse in the Bible that proves it beyond any doubt, and tonight I am going to show you that verse and show you how to finally claim the wealth God has always wanted for you to have. So let us go straight to it. The premise is this. 3 John chapter 1 verse 2 says, Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. Read that again. I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper. These are the words of God spoken through the apostle, and they say plainly that God wishes, above all things, for you to prosper, not to struggle, not to scrape by, not to live in lack as some kind of test, but to prosper. And notice the strength of the language. It does not say God permits you to prosper, or tolerates it, or allows it grudgingly. It says He wishes it, above all things. This is desire. This is God's active want for your life. And the word prosper here means to do well, to succeed, to thrive, in every area, in your finances, your health, your whole life. This is a God who wants you thriving, and Florence Scovel Shinn spent her life teaching people to wake up to exactly this truth, that the divine is not a stern withholder but a generous giver, longing to pour good into the lives of those who will simply open and receive. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught exactly this, that abundance is your divine birthright, that the God who made a universe overflowing with stars and oceans and abundance beyond counting never intended for his children to live in poverty. Lack was never the plan. Prosperity was. And most people have been taught the exact opposite. They have been taught that wanting money is greedy, that being poor is somehow holy. that spirituality and wealth cannot mix, and that lie has kept them in chains their entire lives. Tonight we break it, because the very scripture they claim to follow says God wishes above all things for them to prosper. Here is the affirmation. Speak it with me. I claim the wealth God wills for me. I receive it now without guilt. My word is my wand. Say it again, and mean it. I claim the wealth God wills for me. I receive it now without guilt. My word is my wand. Feel that. You are not asking for something shameful. You are claiming something God Himself wishes for you. And the moment you accept that, the guilt that has blocked your abundance begins to fall away. If you believe that God wants you to prosper, type one word in the comments right now. Amen. Just type Amen, and let it be your declaration of agreement. Now let me give you the first key, which is the proof itself, that God explicitly wills your prosperity, because this is the foundation everything else rests on. Most people are not blocked by a lack of technique. They are blocked by a hidden belief that God does not actually want them to have wealth, that maybe it is even wrong to ask. But Scripture says otherwise again and again. 3 John says, God wishes above all things that you prosper. Deuteronomy says, it is God who gives you the power to get wealth. The Psalms say, the Lord takes pleasure in the prosperity of His servant. Over and over, the Bible reveals a God of abundance who delights in the prosperity of His children. Florence taught that God is the source of your supply, an endless, overflowing source, and that this source wants to pour through you. The only thing stopping it is your own belief that you are not meant to receive it. So the first shift is to settle this question completely in your heart. God is not glorified by your poverty. He is glorified by your prosperity, by your life becoming a testimony of His abundance. When you truly accept that your wealth is God's will, and not against it, you remove the deepest block there is. And let me show you just how consistent Scripture is on this, because it is not one isolated verse. It is a theme running through the entire Bible. The book of Genesis shows God making Abraham very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. The book of Job ends with God restoring to Job twice as much as he had before. The Psalms declare that wealth and riches shall be in the house of the one who honors God. Proverbs says the blessing of the Lord makes rich, and adds no sorrow with it. Over and over, the God of the Bible is revealed not as a God who wants His people poor, but as a God who blesses, prospers, and enriches those who walk with Him. Florence taught that this is the true nature of the divine, endless, overflowing, generous, and that our poverty consciousness is a human invention, not a divine decree. So when the old voice tells you that God wants you humble and poor, you can answer it with the whole weight of Scripture. The God of Abraham, of Job, of the Psalms, is a God of overflowing abundance, and that same God is your source. The second key is the lie that has been keeping you poor, the belief that wanting wealth is greedy or unspiritual, because this is the specific poison that stops most people. They have absorbed the idea that money is dirty, that the spiritual path is a path of lack, that to want more is to be less holy, and Florence Scovel Shinn taught that this is one of the most damaging beliefs a person can carry, because you cannot receive what you secretly believe is wrong to have. If part of you feels guilty about wealth, you will unconsciously push it away every time it comes near. You will sabotage, you will shrink, you will settle, all because deep down you believe prosperity and goodness cannot coexist. But the truth is the opposite. Poverty helps no one. A poor person cannot feed the hungry, cannot build, cannot give, cannot lift others. It is abundance that allows you to bless the world. God does not want you small and struggling. He wants you overflowing, so that you become a channel of His abundance to everyone around you. Wanting wealth is not greed. It is alignment with a God of abundance, and the moment you release the guilt and claim your prosperity as holy and right, the flow that was blocked for years begins to move. And I want you to really examine where this lie came from, because it did not come from God. It came from centuries of teaching that confused poverty with piety, that told ordinary people to accept their lack quietly and wait for their reward in heaven. And while there is deep virtue in humility and contentment, that is very different from believing God wants you to suffer in lack. Florence Scovel Shinn drew a sharp line here. She taught that there is nothing spiritual about poverty, nothing holy about struggle, that these things dull the spirit rather than elevate it. The person crushed by financial worry is not closer to God. They are simply exhausted and afraid. God does not need your poverty. The world does not benefit from your lack. And when you finally see that the guilt around wealth was a lie handed to you, not a truth from God, you can set it down. And setting it down is often the single thing that unblocks a lifetime of stuck abundance. Because the guilt was the dam, and the moment it breaks, the supply that was always waiting begins to flow. Before I give you the next keys, let me be direct with you for a moment, because claiming God's promise of prosperity is not a one-time event. It is something you must do every single day, until the old belief in lack is completely replaced, and most people cannot hold that alone. They feel the truth for a moment, then the old guilt and doubt creep right back in. This is exactly why I created the Overflow Covenant, a 21-day sequence where one short decree rooted in these truths lands in your inbox every single morning, to keep you claiming the prosperity God wills for you, day after day, until it becomes your natural state. It is $27 one payment, 30-day full refund. The link is in the description. Begin it tonight, and let the first decree reach you in the morning. Now let me give you the third key, which is that you must actively claim the promise, not passively wait for it. Because this is where Scripture and Florence's teaching meet perfectly. God has given the promise, but the promise must be claimed. Florence taught that your word is your wand, that you must speak your good into being, and the Bible agrees. It says you shall decree a thing, and it shall be established unto you. It says, whatsoever things you desire, when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you shall have them. Notice that you must claim, you must decree, you must believe you receive. The promise of prosperity is not going to force itself on you. You have to accept it, actively, with your words and your faith. So you stop waiting and hoping, and you start claiming. You speak it. God's abundance is mine now. I claim the prosperity He wills for me. I receive it under grace. You take the promise that is already given, and you make it yours through the spoken, believing word. This is how the promise moves from the pages of Scripture into the reality of your life, and let me give you the exact way to claim it, so this is not vague, because there is a real difference between wishing and claiming. Wishing sounds like, I hope things get better, I wish I had more, and it keeps your good at a distance. But claiming sounds like, God's abundance is mine now. I claim the prosperity He wills for me, and it takes hold of the promise as already yours. Florence taught that the words you speak carry creative power, that you are always framing your world with your word, so you deliberately choose words that claim rather than beg. You speak in the present. As one who already has the promise, you might declare, I am the heir of a God of abundance, and I claim my inheritance now. Under grace, you might say, the prosperity God wishes for me is flowing to me now, in perfect ways, and you say it with the authority of one who knows the promise is real and rightfully theirs. This is not begging God for a favor. It is agreeing with what God has already declared. You are simply bringing your word into alignment with His will. And when your word agrees with God's will for your prosperity, nothing can keep it from you. The fourth key is that you must feel worthy to receive God's abundance, because this is the hidden block beneath so many others. Many people can accept that God wants prosperity in general, but secretly believe they personally do not deserve it, that they are too flawed, too ordinary, too far gone, and this feeling of unworthiness blocks the flow completely. But Scripture tells you who you actually are. It says you are a child of God, and if a child, then an heir of God. Florence taught that you must know your divine identity, that you are not a lowly beggar hoping for scraps, but a child of the King, rightfully entitled to the abundance of your Father. When you truly grasp that you are God's own child and heir, the unworthiness dissolves. You stop feeling like you have to earn or deserve His abundance through suffering, and you start receiving it as the birthright it is. A good father wants to give good things to his children, and you are his child, so you claim your inheritance not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of one who knows exactly whose child they are. And let me help you truly feel this, because knowing you are God's heir in your head is different from feeling it in your heart. Imagine a child of a loving, wealthy father. That child does not grovel or beg for food, does not feel guilty asking for what they need, does not believe they must suffer to earn their father's care. They simply live as a beloved child, secure in the knowledge that their father delights in providing for them. Florence taught that this is exactly your relationship with the divine. You are the beloved child of an infinitely abundant Father who delights in your prosperity. And when you begin to feel that, really feel it, the striving and the unworthiness melt away. You stop approaching your good like a beggar and start receiving it like an heir. And this shift in feeling is powerful, because the subconscious responds to feeling more than to words. When you genuinely feel worthy, when you feel like the cherished child of an abundant God, you stop unconsciously blocking your good, and the abundance that your unworthiness held back begins to reach you at last. The fifth key is the daily practice of claiming your prosperity, and it is simple, but it must be constant. In the morning, before anything else, you claim the promise, you speak it. God wishes above all things for me to prosper, and I claim that prosperity now. You set your entire day in agreement with God's will for your abundance. Through the day, you guard against the old guilt and lack. Every time you feel that familiar shame about wanting more, or that whisper that says you do not deserve it, you stop, and you return to the truth. God wills my prosperity. I am His heir. I receive it now. At night, as you drift towards sleep, you give thanks that God's abundance is flowing to you, and you rest in the peace of one whose supply is guaranteed by God Himself. This is the rhythm. Claim it in the morning. Guard the truth through the day. Give thanks at night, every single day, until living in the abundance God wills for you becomes as natural as breathing. And let me explain why claiming it daily matters so much. Because a single declaration, however sincere, cannot undo years of believing in lack, the belief that money is scarce, that you do not deserve it, that God wants you humble and poor, was built through countless repetitions over many years, and it can only be replaced the same way, through the faithful repetition of the truth. This is why the morning claiming is so important. You set the day in agreement with God's abundant will before the world can pull you back into fear. And the daytime guarding matters because life will constantly test you. The bill, the shortfall, the comparison, each one an invitation to fall back into the old lack. And you meet each one by returning to the truth. And the nighttime thanksgiving matters because gratitude seals your faith. You fall asleep certain that God's supply is yours, and that certainty works in you through the night. And this daily rhythm of claiming God's prosperity is exactly what the overflow covenant is built to make automatic, because knowing the truth and remembering to claim it every single day are two different things. The decree arrives each morning to place the truth of God's abundant will back in front of you, morning after morning, until claiming your prosperity is simply who you are. The sixth key is understanding that God's wealth is meant to flow through you, not just to you, because this is what makes your prosperity holy and unstoppable. Florence taught that money is a form of God in action, and that it is meant to circulate, to flow. God does not bless you with abundance so you can hoard it in fear. He blesses you so that His abundance can move through you into the world, so that you can give, build, help, and lift others. And here is the beautiful part. The more you understand yourself as a channel for God's abundance rather than a dead end for it, the more freely it flows to you, because a channel that gives freely stays open, and an open channel keeps receiving. The Bible says, "Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over." When you bless others with your abundance, you keep yourself in the flow of God's endless supply. You become a river of His prosperity, not a stagnant pond. And a river never runs dry, because it is always connected to the source. Here is the whole picture. God wants you wealthy, and 3 John proves it. He wishes above all things that you prosper. The lie that wealth is greedy or unspiritual has kept you blocked. But prosperity is your divine birthright. You must actively claim the promise with your believing word. You must know yourself as God's worthy heir. You claim it daily and guard the truth, and you let God's abundance flow through you into the world. Every part of this is available to you starting tonight. The verse has been shown to you, the promise is yours to claim, and the only thing required is that you actually claim it, and keep claiming it. Before we close, let me be direct one final time. The reason most people never step into the prosperity God wills for them is that they cannot hold the truth on their own. The old guilt and lack pull them back again and again. This is the entire reason the overflow covenant exists, to keep the truth of God's abundant will in front of you every single morning for 21 days, until claiming your prosperity becomes automatic. You can find it at the link in the description. 21 mornings, 1 decree each day, $27, 30-day full refund. So speak the affirmation with me one final time before you go. I claim the wealth God wills for me. I receive it now without guilt. My word is my wand. Hold that. And there is one sentence you can say tonight, right before you fall asleep, and wake up tomorrow with money already moving toward you. One sentence. That is all. And tonight, I am going to give it to you. Florence Scovel Shinn knew this secret. The moments before sleep are the most powerful moments of your entire day. So let us begin. The premise is simple. Psalm 16:7 says, "My reins also instruct me in the night seasons." Read that again. The night seasons. You are instructed in the night. The deepest work happens not in your busy waking hours, but in the quiet, as you fall asleep. And here is why. As you drift towards sleep, your conscious mind goes quiet. The doubting part of you steps aside. The critic falls asleep first, and your subconscious lies wide open. Whatever you plant in that open mind, in those final seconds, sinks deep, and it is worked on all night long. The wealthy have always known this. The last thought before sleep shapes the next day. Most people waste it. Tonight you will not. Tonight you use it on purpose. Here is the sentence. Speak it with me, softly. I receive my good as I sleep. The night is doing the work. My word is my wand. Say it again. Let it be the last thing you carry toward sleep. I receive my good as I sleep. The night is doing the work. My word is my wand. Feel that. The sentence hands the work over to the night. No straining, no forcing. You plant the word, sleep carries it deep. That feeling is surrender, and surrender is what lets the subconscious do what your conscious mind never could. If those words moved something in you, scroll down right now and write, "The night is doing the work." Your comment is the first planting of your own night practice, and it joins everyone speaking this before sleep tonight. Now let me give you the first piece, which is why the moments before sleep are the most powerful moments of your entire day, because almost nobody understands what is actually happening in those final minutes. All day long, your conscious mind stands guard. It filters, it doubts, it argues, and most of what you think never reaches the deep mind. It is turned away at the door. But as you drift towards sleep, that guard grows tired and steps away. And for a few minutes, the subconscious lies completely open and unguarded. Whatever thought you hold in those final waking moments walks straight through the open door and impresses itself on the deep mind, which then works on it all night while you sleep. This is why the last thought before sleep is the single most powerful thought of your entire day. And here is the tragedy. Most people waste it completely. They fall asleep worrying about money, replaying their fears, rehearsing their lack, and they spend the whole night impressing lack deep into the open subconscious. Then they wake and wonder why nothing ever changes. But Florence taught that this same power can be turned the other way, that if you fall asleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, in the assumption that your good has already come, you spend the entire night impressing abundance instead of lack. The night becomes your ally instead of your enemy. You are being shaped in your sleep either way. The only question is what you choose to be shaped by. And tonight, you choose abundance. And let me explain exactly what is happening in your mind during those final minutes. Because once you understand it, you will never waste another night. When you are fully awake, your brain produces fast, active brain waves, the waves of the alert, critical thinking mind. And in this state, your conscious mind is firmly in control, guarding the entrance to your subconscious. But as you begin to fall asleep, your brain waves slow down. You pass through a state the mind enters right on the edge of sleep, a drowsy, half-dreaming state, where the boundary between conscious and subconscious grows thin, and in this state, suggestions pass almost directly into the deep mind without being filtered or argued with. This is the same state that hypnotists use to plant suggestions, except you do not need a hypnotist. You enter this state naturally every single night as you fall asleep, and you leave the door wide open. The only question is what walks through it. The worried person walks their fears through that open door every night. The bills, the lack, the fear of tomorrow, and the subconscious accepts these as instructions and works to produce more of them. But the person who knows this secret walks abundance through the door instead. They speak their good, they feel their wish fulfilled, and the subconscious accepts that as the instruction and works to produce that. You have a doorway to the deepest part of your mind that opens for a few minutes every single night. And Florence taught that what you do with that doorway determines the shape of your life. The second piece is why sleep itself does the work that effort never can. Because most people believe that getting what they want requires more striving, more pushing, more trying. But Florence taught the opposite. She taught that the subconscious mind is the worker, and the subconscious does its work while you rest, not while you strain. Think of how a seed grows. You do not stand over it, pulling at the sprout to make it rise faster. You plant it, and you let the unseen process do the growing. The subconscious works exactly the same way. You plant the word before sleep, and then you get out of the way. You let go, you sleep, and the deep mind goes to work, arranging, connecting, drawing the good toward you through channels the conscious mind could never have planned. This is why the night practice is so powerful and so effortless at the same time. The effort is almost nothing. You simply speak the sentence and fall asleep in it. But the work that happens is immense, because you have handed it to the part of you that actually does the creating. The striving conscious mind was never the creator. It was only ever the planter. The subconscious is the soil, and the gardener both. And it works best in the dark, in the quiet, while you sleep. And consider how much evidence you already have for this in your own life. Think of how many times you struggled with a problem all day, pushing and straining to solve it, and got nowhere, and then you slept on it, and woke the next morning with the answer simply there, clear and obvious, as though it had assembled itself overnight. That is the subconscious working in the dark while you rested. You have experienced it countless times without realizing what it meant. The conscious mind hammered at the problem and failed, but the moment you released it and slept, the deep mind solved it effortlessly. Florence taught that this same process that solves problems overnight also arranges circumstances, draws opportunities, and moves your good toward you. The subconscious is not limited to solving puzzles. It is the creative power itself, and it operates by the same law, whether it is finding you an answer or finding you a fortune. You plant the desire, you release it in sleep, and the deep mind goes to work in ways the conscious mind cannot see and could never orchestrate. This is why the wealthy so often speak of waking with ideas, of opportunities appearing as if by luck, of the right person arriving at the right moment. It is not luck. It is the night work of a subconscious that was given the right instruction before sleep and left undisturbed to carry it out. Now, before I give you the remaining 4 pieces, I have to stop and tell you something directly, because everything I have just taught you about the night points to one practical problem that almost nobody solves on their own. The night practice only works if you actually do it every single night, and the truth is that 1 night or 2 nights changes very little. The old patterns were built over years of falling asleep in worry, and they surrender only to a new pattern repeated faithfully until it takes hold. And most people simply cannot sustain it on their own. They do it for a night or two. They feel something shift, and then they forget. They fall back into the old habit of falling asleep in fear. This is exactly the problem I built the Overflow Covenant to solve. It is a 21-day sequence where one short Florence Shinn decree lands in your inbox every single morning. You carry it through your day, and you speak it again as you fall asleep. And it builds the night practice into your life, 1 day at a time, for 21 days straight, which is the span it takes for falling asleep in abundance to become automatic. You do not have to remember. You do not have to rely on willpower. The decree is simply there, guiding you into the right state every night. It is $27, 1 payment, no app to install, no platform to log into, just your inbox every morning for 21 mornings. And there is a 30-day full refund, so the risk is entirely mine. The link is in the description. It is called the Overflow Covenant. Begin it tonight, and let the first decree reach you tomorrow morning. Now let me give you the 3rd piece, which is the exact state you must enter as you fall asleep, and why the feeling matters more than the words. Because the words alone are not what does the work. It is the feeling behind them. Florence taught that the subconscious responds to feeling far more than to language. You can recite the most perfect sentence 1,000 times, but if you say it with anxiety, with doubt, with the underlying feeling that it is not true, then anxiety and doubt are what you impress. The feeling is the real message. The words are only the carrier. So as you say the night sentence, you must let yourself actually feel it. You must enter the feeling of already having received your good. the quiet satisfaction of one whose prayer is already answered. This is what Neville and Florence both pointed to, the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You do not beg for the thing as you fall asleep. You give thanks for it as though it is already yours. You feel the relief, the gratitude, the calm certainty of one who already has, and you carry that feeling across the threshold of sleep, because that feeling, impressed on the open subconscious all night long, becomes the new assumption from which your reality is drawn. The words point the direction, but the feeling is what gets planted, and a word planted with the feeling of fulfillment grows into the fulfillment itself. And let me give you a way to find this feeling, even when your life does not yet match it, because this is the obstacle most people hit. They try to feel wealthy while staring at an empty account, and the feeling will not come. It feels like lying. So here is what Florence understood. You do not have to manufacture the feeling about the money directly. You reach for the feeling of relief, the feeling of a burden lifted, the feeling you would have if you knew, truly knew, that everything was going to be all right. Think of a time in your life when you were worried about something and then received the news that it was resolved. Remember that wash of relief, that loosening in your chest, that quiet gratitude. That is the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and you can summon it by remembering it. You bring up that remembered relief, and you attach it to your good as you fall asleep. You are not lying, you are borrowing a real feeling you have genuinely felt before and placing it on the thing you now desire. The subconscious does not know the difference between a feeling about the past and a feeling about the future. It simply receives the feeling and goes to work producing more circumstances that match it. So when the direct feeling of wealth will not come, reach for the universal feeling of relief and fulfillment, and let that be what you carry into sleep. And let me give you one more key about feeling that Florence emphasized again and again. The feeling must be in the present, not the future. Most people feel their wish as something distant, something that would feel good if it ever happened, and that future feeling keeps the wish forever in the future. But the night practice requires you to feel the wish as fulfilled now, in this moment. As you lie in bed, you must drop the sense that the good is coming, and take up the sense that the good is here, that it is already done, already yours, already received, and you give thanks for it as a present reality. This shift from future longing to present gratitude is the entire difference between a practice that works and one that does not. The subconscious takes your present feeling as the truth and builds your world to match it. So if your present feeling each night is one of lack and longing, it builds lack. But if your present feeling each night is one of fulfillment and gratitude, it builds fulfillment. You must feel it done, now, tonight, as you fall asleep. The fourth piece is why you must let go completely once you have planted the word, and not lie awake, trying to force the result. Because this is where most people sabotage the entire practice. They speak the sentence, they begin to feel it, and then they immediately start straining, checking, wondering when it will work, scanning their mind for evidence, and all of that anxious effort slams the door shut again. The subconscious cannot work on the word if the conscious mind keeps yanking it back to inspect it. This is like planting a seed and then digging it up every hour to see if it has grown. The digging kills it. What Florence taught instead is the art of letting go. You plant the word, you feel the fulfillment, and then you release it completely. You let yourself sink into sleep with no anxiety about the outcome, trusting that the work is being done. This releasing is itself an act of faith. It is the demonstration that you truly believe the good is already yours. Because we do not anxiously chase the things we are certain of, we rest in them. So the deepest skill of the night practice is the surrender, the complete letting go into sleep, trusting the unseen process. And that trust is itself part of what makes it work. And there is a deeper spiritual principle underneath this letting go that is worth understanding. The act of releasing your desire into sleep is the purest expression of faith there is, because faith is not the same as anxious hoping. Anxious hoping is actually a form of doubt. It is the constant checking, the worried wondering, the inability to rest, that reveals you do not truly believe the thing is yours. Real faith is the opposite. It is the quiet ability to let the matter go because you are certain it is handled. Think of how you trust that the sun will rise tomorrow. You do not lie awake anxiously hoping it will rise. You do not check every hour through the night. You simply know it, and that knowing lets you sleep in peace. This is the faith Florence pointed to. The faith that lets you plant your word and then sleep soundly, untroubled, because you know the work is being done. And here is the beautiful paradox. This very letting go, this peaceful release, is itself part of what causes the manifestation, because the anxious, grasping energy of doubt repels, while the calm, released energy of faith allows. When you release your desire into sleep with genuine peace, you are demonstrating the faith that permits the good to come, and when you clutch at it anxiously through the night, you are demonstrating the doubt that holds it away. So the letting go is not just a technique for better sleep, it is the very act of faith that opens the door. The fifth piece is the exact night protocol, the precise sequence to follow as you lie down. And the precision matters. First, once you are lying in bed and the lights are out, you let your body grow still and your breathing slow. You do not begin until you feel yourself starting to drift. That drowsy state on the edge of sleep is the most receptive state of all. It is the doorway. Second, in that drowsy state, you speak the sentence slowly, inwardly, with feeling. I receive my good as I sleep. The night is doing the work. My word is my wand. You do not say it mechanically. You let each phrase carry the feeling of already having. Third, you choose one simple scene that represents your wish already fulfilled, a brief imagined moment that implies the good has already come, and you replay that short scene gently as you drift, feeling its reality. Fourth, you let the scene and the sentence dissolve as sleep takes you. You do not fight to stay awake. You do not strain to hold the image. You simply let go and let sleep carry the word into the deep mind. This is the whole protocol. Grow still. Speak the sentence in the drowsy state. Replay one short scene of fulfillment and dissolve into sleep, repeated night after night. This is what builds the new pattern and lets the night do its work. And let me say more about the short scene you choose, because this is the most powerful and most misunderstood part of the protocol. Florence and Neville both taught that the imagination is the actual creative faculty, that what you imagine vividly and feelingly tends to become your reality, but the scene must be constructed correctly. It must not be a scene of you wishing for the thing or trying to get the thing. It must be a scene that implies the thing is already yours, already done, already received. For example, if you desire money, you do not imagine yourself praying for money or worrying about money. You imagine a brief moment that could only be true if the money had already come. Perhaps the feeling of paying a bill with ease, perhaps a friend congratulating you, perhaps the quiet satisfaction of looking at your account and feeling secure. The scene must be short, simple, and saturated with the feeling of fulfillment. A single moment that your mind can replay easily as you drift. And you do not watch this scene like a movie on a screen in front of you. You enter it. You experience it from the inside as though it is happening to you now. You feel it with your senses. And then as sleep takes you, you let it fade naturally. You are giving the subconscious a clear picture of the end, the wish already fulfilled, and the subconscious will work through the night to make your outer world match the inner scene you fell asleep inside of. And this nightly protocol is exactly what the overflow covenant is designed to make effortless. Because knowing the protocol and actually following it faithfully every night are two very different things. The decree arrives each morning to set your direction, and it becomes the natural sentence you carry into sleep that night. So the morning planting and the night sealing are connected into one unbroken practice, and the daily delivery removes the single greatest obstacle, the forgetting. You never have to wonder what to say or whether you remembered. It is simply there, guiding you into the right state morning and night for 21 days until the entire rhythm becomes second nature. The sixth piece is the contrarian truth that doing less at night accomplishes more than all your daytime striving, and this inverts everything the world has taught you about success. The world says, work harder, push more, strive longer. But Florence taught that the most powerful creative act available to you happens not in striving, but in the surrendered moments before sleep, when you stop trying and simply plant a word in faith. The person who strains all day and falls asleep in worry is working endlessly and creating nothing but more of the same. But the person who moves calmly through the day and falls asleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled is doing almost nothing and creating everything, because they have aligned themselves with the way creation actually works, through the subconscious, in rest, in surrender, in the night. This does not mean you do nothing in your waking hours. It means you stop believing that strain is what creates. The creation happens in the depths while you sleep. Your waking action becomes the natural response to the new state, rather than a desperate attempt to force a result. The wealthy learn to let the night do the heavy lifting, and they wake to act on the opportunities the night arranged. Doing less, in the right way, accomplishes more than all the striving in the world. And I want to address the resistance you may feel to this idea, because it runs so counter to everything you have been taught that part of you may reject it. You have been told your whole life that money comes from hard work, from hustle, from relentless effort, and here I am, telling you that the real creation happens in surrender, in rest, in the moments before sleep, and that doing less in the right way accomplishes more. This sounds almost irresponsible, almost too easy. And that very feeling is what keeps most people trapped in endless striving. But consider the evidence around you. Consider how many people work themselves to exhaustion their entire lives and never become wealthy. If hard work alone created wealth, every exhausted laborer would be rich. Clearly something else is at work. And consider how often wealth seems to flow to those who have learned to operate from a calm, expectant, almost effortless state, who seem to attract opportunities rather than chase them. Florence taught that these people have aligned themselves with the actual law of creation, which works through consciousness, through assumption, through the subconscious, not through strain. This does not make you lazy. You will still act, but your action will come from inspiration rather than desperation, from a settled knowing rather than anxious grasping, and action taken from that state is effortless and effective, while action taken from desperation is exhausting and fruitless. And notice that the people who most need this are often the ones who resist it hardest, the exhausted, the struggling, the ones who have tried everything through sheer effort and are tired to their bones. They have been taught that to rest is to fail, that to stop striving is to give up, and so the very idea of creating through surrender feels threatening to them. But it is precisely these people, the ones who have proven that endless effort does not work, who have the most to gain from learning that the deep mind creates in rest. The night practice is how you enter the settled state. You fall asleep in fulfillment. You wake in expectation, and you move through your day as someone for whom the good is already assured. Here is the whole picture. There is one Florence Shinn sentence you can say before sleep that lets you wake with your good already moving toward you. And it works because the moments before sleep are when the subconscious lies open and receptive. You plant the word in the drowsy state, with the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You replay one short scene of fulfillment, and you surrender completely into sleep, letting the deep mind do the work all night long. You stop falling asleep in worry and start falling asleep in abundance, and night after night the new pattern takes hold, until waking in expectation becomes your natural state. Every part of this is available to you starting tonight. The sentence has been given, the protocol has been explained, and the only thing required is that you actually do it as you fall asleep. And I want to leave you with one final thought about why this matters so much. You spend roughly a third of your entire life asleep, and for most people that immense stretch of time is wasted, or worse, spent impressing fear and lack into the deep mind night after night. But you have just learned to reclaim that third of your life, to turn your sleep from wasted hours into the most productive and creative time you have. Imagine what changes when every single night becomes a planting of abundance instead of a rehearsal of fear. When the third of your life spent sleeping is finally working for you instead of against you. This is not a small adjustment. It is a fundamental reclaiming of the most powerful and most neglected hours you possess. The night was always meant to instruct you, to counsel you, to work for you, as the verse said. Your rains instruct you in the night seasons, and tonight you begin to let the night do what it was always meant to do. Before we close, I have to be direct with you one final time. The reason most people never transform their nights is not that they lack the sentence, it is that they cannot sustain the practice on their own. They forget. They slip back into old worry. The pattern never takes hold. This is the entire reason the Overflow Covenant exists. To place a fresh Florence Shinn decree in your inbox every single morning for 21 days, so the night practice is guided and reinforced, so the new pattern actually takes hold, so the nights actually change. You can find it at the link in the description. 21 mornings, one decree each day, $27, 30-day full refund. Remember that the night belongs to you, that these hours of sleep are yours to use, and that the simple act of falling asleep in the feeling of your good, already received, is the most powerful and most effortless practice available to any person on earth. So speak the sentence with me one final time before you go. I receive my good as I sleep. The night is doing the work. My word is my wand. Hold that, and tonight as you lie down and feel yourself drifting, let this be the last thing you carry into sleep, and wake tomorrow to a world that has been working for you all night long.